family against me? All for what? All for what? A joke? All because you can't let go of what happened?
Is he fucking serious? He does this all the time. He always says, like, why can't you just let it go? I said my piece. I apologize. This is just a few hours, maybe a few days. I'm not sure the exact time frame, but it's not even a week after he got exposed for this shit. And he's saying, like, you know, you just gotta let it go. You gotta sweep it under the rug. This doesn't matter, guys. What matters, though, is all you people trolling me, though. But me actually doing this shit and being a creep doesn't fucking matter. At the beginning there, he's mad about having to tell his friends to avoid a certain Discord chat because people would tell them about the shit he did. You know, just all of his anger is completely misdirected, but like, it's Cyrax. Of course it's going to be misdirected because he doesn't know genuinely how to take his own. Like, he doesn't know how to take any accountability. We've already brought that up, but it's so wild to see he'll blame fucking everybody in the world before he turns that finger on himself. But him bringing up that his family is, like, turning it back on him, I doubt that. His family are pretty big creeps, too, you know? Remember, Cyrax is a third-generation pedo. Granddad was a pedo, dad was a pedo, runs in the family.
You're a bunch of pussies. You're a bunch of comeback pussies. Yeah, I fucked up. I made a mistake. Big fucking deal. You ain't perfect. You ain't perfect, bitch.
Like, seriously, he acts like it's such a non-issue. He's going with the whole, you know, everyone makes mistakes excuse, acting like, you know, you're not perfect, everyone's done this at least once in their lives, everyone's talked to a fucking minor. You know, he's such a fucking weirdo, because you know deep down, he wants to believe that he's the good guy still, that everybody else is the bad guy. But at the same time, it's just when he says shit like that, it's just so ridiculous. Because how can you possibly think that this is just something that, you know, this is just, oh, it happens, you know, you live and you learn, I guess. Like, no, not at all.
You ain't motherfucking perfect. You ain't perfect. So quit acting like you are.
Can we just admire the theatrics here? Just how he's looking so serious, like he's really proving a point. Wait until he puts that finger up, just to show you all a lesson. Look at that.
Cause you ain't perfect, bitch. You wanna sit here and go after me? Go after me, but leave my friends the fuck alone. And stay the fuck off my goddamn Facebook, bitch.
We gotta go ahead and give a big round of applause and thank the heroes that let Cyrax's friends, who most likely were in the dark and not privy to the fact that they had like a predator on their friends list. You gotta appreciate the effort people went to save those people, so thank you to anyone who was there that day. You know, you did a great job in letting Cyrax's friends know that. Now, Cyrax thinks you're a piece of shit, but the rest of the world thinks you're a hero, ladies and gentlemen.
You ain't shit. You know you ain't shit. You wanna know what really happened? That little comeback kid made a group chat on Facebook called Thunderdome, right? Well, guess what this comeback decided to turn around and do? Add my friends to it. Turn my friends against me. So now I done lost half my goddamn friends because of this bitch. Yo, Kate, grow up, bitch.
So basically basically, I get it now. So this Kate person, the person who exposed Cyrax, made a Facebook group chat, told all Cyrax's friends about it, and obviously most of these people weren't going to be cool with it. I assume most of these people were trolls in the first place, so, like, it's not too obvious that they turned their backs on Cyrax, but once again, like, blaming the people who exposed him for the shit he did, it's classic Cyrax 101 here.
And that ain't even the worst of it. That ain't even the worst of it. This bitch flat out told me, the only way she'll leave me alone is if I cut my goddamn dick off. That's the only way that she'll leave me alone is if I cut my dick off. You tell me that ain't fucked up. You tell me that ain't a load of shit.
You know, if we're being completely honest, that does seem like a pretty fair trade-off for being a pedo, you know? If you want to be a pedo, you gotta be willing to go through what Cyrax just said there. But, I gotta be honest, that didn't come out of nowhere. I didn't really think that was where this was gonna go. I thought she would have, like, fucked with him and told him to get off the internet. Didn't know she went that route with it, but, yeah, you know, like, Cyrax is not fucking with this person, you know, he thinks they ruined his life, even though he kind of ruined his life by doing this bullshit, so there's still a lot more for us to look at here, though, but just know that very soon, you're gonna see Cyrax's real true colors, and see just the lengths he would go to get rid of all this bullshit, to get rid of this person who, he sees as someone who wronged him tremendously.
Not about to buy anything from you.
Afraid you're mistaken.
It don't matter what my actions were.
You got
That don't matter.
And if I don't...
That's irrelevant.
Then you die.
My actions shouldn't determine what this bitch does. What? Did you forget that I came out and wrote that wrong? Did you forget that I came out and wrote that wrong? Did you forget that I came out and admitted my wrong? Did you forget that? Did you forget that I came out and admitted what I did? So, Shot-Town, if I were you, I'd shut your ass up right now, little boy.
He's so goddamn delusional. Like, just in the beginning there, can you believe he'd say that? Like, it doesn't matter what my actions were. My actions shouldn't dictate what she does to me. You know, he doesn't want to be held accountable for anything. Like, he always has an excuse for everything he does. He always acts like it's someone else's fault. When he always gets in these arguments with Marty, he always uses and he always tries to fall back on, well, look, it's because you make me feel this way, so I have to do these things. He always has someone else to fucking blame this on. And for him to act like his actions don't matter and they shouldn't do anything, it's just another one of his many copes. And this is like one that you'll rarely ever see him pull because he's literally backed into like the fucking sharpest corner he's ever been into. And it's amazing to hear him say that, you know? And then, unbelievably, he jumps back to the whole, I've already made that wrong right, guys, you know, he's already admitted to his faults and everything. All he does is say, yeah, I fucked up and move on, and that to him is like, alright, well, I did enough now I can move on with my life, and that's that. But anyone else's issue, he's gotta press that shit home, you know? He'll be sure to still bitch about this masshole girl, like, forever. But his issues, you shouldn't bring that up even, like, a couple minutes after they happen, because that's in the past.
Yeah, what I did was wrong. What the fucking do? I'm not fucking perfect. I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect.
Give me up.
Yes, Cyrax, that's right. We are all not perfect. But unlike you, and I assume the 100% of people watching this video,
Faster.
no one here has talked to a fucking minor. So, you know, at least we have that over you.
We all make mistakes, people.
Go.
Grow up. We all make mistakes. We're all human.
I don't know about that one, Cyrax. Your little crackhead ass kind of looks pretty out there.
Grow up, you bitch-ass cowards. Y'all are a bunch of pussies. bitch ass pussy. I decide that. I decide that, and those that stand behind me decide that. Not your punk ass bitch. So sit the fuck down and shut up. Hello? Yo fucking pussies need to leave me alone.
I got him. I love the little hello when he picks up the phone, like all normally, and then once he realizes no one's on the other line, he just goes right back to fucking screaming. It's just, you know, he can shut that shit off if he wants to, but he just wants to yell. He just wants to be loud. He wants to be making a scene. Cyrax just loves that shit. And, you know, gotta admit, I love to watch it. It's quite the spectacle. You gotta love watching a predator freak the fuck out. But we're not done yet with Cyrax freakouts. We're going to look at another little clip here of Cyrax again explaining why he's not a pedophile in really terrible detail. Like, he never explains it good, and he just kind of makes himself sound even worse. But let's just look at it and see how Cyrax looks at himself.
What up, y'all? So, we got something to fucking talk about. Okay? First off, y'all motherfuckers that are over here calling me a pedophile, y'all need to knock that shit the fuck off. For real. Y'all need to knock that shit the fuck off right now. Second off, my family is getting sick of y'all calling me a fucking pedophile.
As was previously mentioned, Cyrax is a third-generation pedophile. Grandfather was a pedophile. Father was a pedophile. So, you know, the family's probably heard it quite a lot, so you can imagine that they're sick of hearing it by now. It's been 3 generations of being told this, and Cyrax isn't doing them any help, because, you know, you could have been different, but you just had to be this way.
It ain't just me no more. It ain't just my mom. It ain't just my stepdad. It's my whole fucking goddamn family. Trust me, my whole family knows about what's going on, and they're fucking tired of you motherfuckers doing this shit.
Like, I definitely bet his family is tired of all the harassment they're probably getting, like the phone calls and all that. I'm not going to discount that. But it's like, if they were really, really tired of it, like if they couldn't, like if they were staying up all night, couldn't get no sleep because of it, if they were really that sick of it, they would have pulled Cyrax off the internet a long time ago, and not just sat here and let him scream at everyone else online. Like, it's such a naive thought process. You know, if his grandparents really didn't think the people weren't going to listen to Cyrax yelling at them, they should just pull Cyrax away and go, alright, no more fucking internet for you. Like, it's so clear that you keep pissing everybody off and he's never going to get a good night's sleep, so no more internet. And they just can't do that.
Y'all need to fuck off.
A young woman got lost in the swamp.
Second
She has
off,
ashen
if I
hair and a scar on
really
her.
was a
See anyone
fucking
like that?
pedophile, which I'm not, that night that the fucking cops showed up here about this bullshit, guess what? I would have been arrested.
It's really funny to see Cyrax say, you know, here's why I'm not a pedophile, because if I was, you know, when the cops showed up, I would have been arrested. And, you know, he's kind of pulling his Ross the pedophile card here. Like, when the cops showed up, he didn't tell them what he was saying on camera just a few minutes ago. He wasn't saying the whole, you know, I admit it, I messed up, I owned up to my mistake, I shouldn't have done that, no one's perfect. But, like, you know, he didn't tell the cops that. He probably just said, oh, I'm being trolled and all these people are saying this about me. But, you know, on here, he'll scream and rant and say that, you know, yeah, he did it, but that's not, you know, it's everyone else's fault. He's not blaming everyone else, then he's just keeping fucking quiet on that.
But who are you?
Then again, that's just me being stupid,
Like
you know, it's Cyrax, he can't keep his mouth shut for a second. So he's probably telling the cops that, you know, yeah, I did this, I messed up, if they ever confront him with this. And they just don't fucking care because they look at the guy and go, okay, you know, they should take it seriously, but they probably look at you and go, yeah, I don't think he's much of a threat. He looks like he's fucking, he'll just let him break if he tries to run too fast.
Second off, if I really was a pedo, then why is it not on my fucking record?
Where are they now? Maybe they've come to some harm.
If I really was a fucking pedophile, why is it not on my goddamn record?
What are you looking at, Georgie?
I have no record of being a pedophile.
That Johnny
I
knows.
am not a
Ugly word.
pedophile.
You.
The police
Be gone.
here have
Be
even
gone.
said that I am not a fucking pedophile. I showed them everything. And they said the same thing I said. If anyone's the pedophile, it would be Masshole Report.
You can always tell Chance is lying whenever he says, and so agreed with me, because nobody ever agrees with his batshit ideas. So when he says the cops agree, the person who exposed him for being a pedo is the pedo. You obviously know that he's just making all that up. But yeah, Cyrix is trying to use the excuse that, I've never been caught and it's never been proven that I'm a pedo, so that means I'm not one. Which, granted, that's a fair case for most people. But most people don't have fucking text logs come out with them talking to a 14-year-old. So, it's very, these things are very circumstantial. And for Cyrax, the circumstances look like, it looks like a fucking pedo. One of the things that Cyrax does when he's really mad at people is that he'll parrot exactly what they're saying about him and say it back to them. So here you can see with the masshole girl, the girl Kate, the one who exposed him for being a pedo, he's now saying that Cyrax and the cops agree that, she's actually the pedo. So you can see that Cyrax is just about willing to say, and you're about to find out soon, do anything to this person. And let's just jump right into it now and hear a phone call where Music Biz Marty is calling Cyrax to let him know that the hit's going out on Old Masshole Report, and he just needs to get some clarification on if it's cool from Cyrax. So let's hear what Cyrax has to say about a hit being taken out on this person. The person who is accusing Cyrax here of being a pedo.
There's just kind of one complication, and I don't know how you feel about this, but
What's that?
They don't want to leave any witnesses. And
What do you mean witnesses, man? There is no witnesses.
well, I'm just saying, I think she's going to probably be at home when this happens.
Well, do whatever you gotta do, man. I don't give a fuck what you do. Just remember, man. You did this order. It didn't come from me.
Okay.
This is all, man. Like I said, from here on out, it's your call. I got nothing to do with it.
Okay. So let me...
And it's not that I'm trying to be a dick. I just don't want to involve in criminal shit. You know what I mean?
No, I hear you.
So, this is genius. It really is. So Cyrax is, he's telling Marty, that he's cool with whatever Marty has to do. Whatever he has to do to get rid of all the witnesses of this situation, Gotta take them out, doesn't matter. All Cyrax is worried about is going to jail. That he's trying to say to Marty, do what you gotta do, I'm fine with whatever, but, just remember, I'm not involved in this, I'm not saying nothing. When, if he didn't want this woman getting killed at any moment, he could have just said, fuck you, Marty, like he always does, and hung up the phone. But no, he's, deep down he is gung-ho about this.
So, I guess in order to avoid that, let's think hypothetically here. And we'll use the Hitler example, because I think that's a great analogy. Like, if it was 1935...
Yeah, and I do like what you went, and honestly, I do like what you said. If you really think about it, she kind of is. If you really think about it, I mean, the people that she's fucked over and the people that she's hurt, so I get where you're coming from with that.
So they're using Hitler here as an example, and it actually is, it's a good example to bring up when you consider how many times Cyrax name drops Hitler when talking to Marty or arguing with Marty, saying, Hitler is a saint compared to you, Marty. And it shows that Cyrax really doesn't understand, just how terrible Hitler was for him to say that someone like Marty is a saint compared to him. But, in Cyrax's mind, anyone who goes against Cyrax may as well be as bad as Hitler, the worst person on the face of the earth. And when Marty says to Cyrax, just think of that like this, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler because of all the terrible things he did to people, would you? And Cyrax is like, yeah, I think we do have to take out Masshole because of all the terrible, terrible things she's done to people. What people? Well, just Cyrax, obviously, but that still makes her just as bad as Hitler. So to him, it completely justifies it. And when Marty brings it up to him, you even hear him saying, yeah, you're 100% right. She definitely is that bad, and we should do this. So it just shows you Cyrax's line of thinking and how fucking selfish the man is. It's anyone who wrongs him may as well be the worst piece of shit on earth.
So I guess it becomes just a little bit more complicated. But I still think the answer remains that if you had to kill Hitler and his wife and kids to kill Hitler, I would think that would be something that would be okay.
Yeah, like I said, like I don't want any harm to come to the kids or anything, but if it comes to it, it has to come to it. Like I'm not trying to be an evil dick here. I'm really not. I just, like I said, I don't care what you do. Like I said, this is not my call. You're the shot caller on this. Not me.
You can stop now.
Jesus Christ, I never really realized how dark this went. Like, so Cyrax will be willing to take out this woman and her kids if it meant that, like, everyone would stop talking about the fact that he's a fucking pedo. So it's just amazing, like, because you can even hear it. He's still trying to put the blame on Marty. That like, even though Cyrax will be cool with it, and you gotta do what you gotta do. He's not trying to sound like an evil dick or nothing, because obviously it wouldn't be an evil dick move to take out the kids too. But at the end of the day, it's all Marty's plan and everything. So Cyrax, he has nothing to do with this. But if you want to do it, that's cool, Marty. That's all good. The way this dude thinks, it's so fucking funny. He really is like a wannabe supervillain. If he could be, he would.
I have no person that's raised, man. Like, this is your thing, dude. No, like I said, do whatever you feel you have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think
I
think if you put it like this too, that because Kate's got to go, it would almost be cool to have her kids have to grieve and mourn. It would almost just be better if they were put out of it with her. That's a sick way of looking at it, but I think that's, I think it's got to be done.
And there is another thing.
She's busy.
I'm not trying to get involved in any criminal shit here, but I do have a very twisted, fucked up mind.
Yeah.
So, like, what I'm thinking is, like, I know it's gonna sound pretty fucked up, don't get me wrong, but, accidents have been known to happen on a highway or whatever. Accidents have been known to happen.
Like I said, bro, I'm sorry. Cyrax's fucking thought process is the funniest goddamn thing. It's like, look, I'm not trying to do anything illegal, but if you're gonna kill this person's family, let me give you a very specific situation in which I think you can do a good job at it with, which has to do with the highway. Dude, like I said, this is the fact that Cyrax really thought all this shit was legit is amazing. When you remember that he's going to do all this to get rid of the person who's telling everyone the truth about what he said. Cyrax is a terrible, terrible person. And that's the moral of this video. One of the worst people out there is Cyrax. All the things he'd be willing to do to get the shit he did himself, put it under wraps, the shit he did himself being as terrible as it is. Cyrax is just... you don't want to run into Cyrax in a dark alleyway. Not because he'd fight you or anything, but because, he'd probably bite you or something. You have to wiggle your arm to try to get him off you, like kind of like a raccoon, maybe, like a rat. But, you don't want to run into him. That's the moral of the story. You don't want to see him. If he's there, you might get, like, a kick out of it and be like, oh, look at that silly little thing. But, for the most part, you just want to go about your day and avoid all types of Cyraxes. But that's why you come to this channel, because I'll look at this shit for you, and I'll have something for all of us to laugh about here. And I hope you guys were able to laugh at this, even though it's some pretty sick shit being said. At the end of the day, it's still Cyrax being a fucking fool, so if you can sit back, get stoned, maybe have a few drinks and laugh about it, that's all that matters, because it's just a wacky world of Cyrax, ladies and gentlemen. It's always going to get wackier. The dude's a fucking one hell of a character, creepy character, but one crazy, creepy character he is. I want to give shouts out to Vanessa, Liz Vender, Club Doom, Cody Hale, the Ghostbusters fans, Sky, Scaly Schisms, the Echo Spectre, Worman Bjornson, Mick Surly, Akiba's Beat Fan, the Night Owl, Kaitan, Churlish, Isaiah, Feelings Party Place, and Music Biz Marty's Bong. And speaking of Music Bismarcky. I have all the best Cyrax channels linked in the description below if you want to go watch more of these great videos on Cyrax. All these channels below will have it, and there's tons more out there that I'm probably missing out on, but there's a lot of good Cyrax content out there, so if you guys are liking it, definitely go out and find some, because it's some funny shit. But yeah, all those people I mentioned are goats, and all of you who made it to the end here, you're a goat as well. I say it at the end of every one of these videos, but I can't thank you guys enough for watching this whole shit, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. You know, today's Friday, at least when I'm recording this is Friday.
Oh, maybe we should have a conversation about what we could do to, possibly get people to, have more babies. You know what I mean? Like, what could we do to incentivize people having more kids? Oh, maybe we can kind of reduce some of these economic burdens or something like that. You know, it's one of those things where we live in a society, and what's going to happen is as things change, like for instance, as we implement more technology that is more comfortable, we're going to see other, every time you fix something, you break something else, kind of thing, right? So at that point, it's like, okay, what can we do to rectify this issue? You just have to keep answering the crowd's emphasis, or keep answering new issues that may arise in society. And you can't just say, let's just go back to how things were. It's just not how, this is not practical. It's not going to happen.
Making these choices, I don't think it's because they're involved in charity work. I do think that it is more the scenario you outlined in the first time around, which is just like, well, this is what I'm doing. I have my job, I don't want to give it up.
Yeah. But don't you think that people should have the freedom to live their life in that way? I think human beings vary widely, in a huge way. And I think there's some human beings that find a very fulfilling life just reading books and traveling and experiencing different things and seeing art and doing whatever the fuck they want to do. And they don't necessarily have to have kids to live a fulfilling life that way. If they choose to do that with someone who they have a loving bond with, who they get married to, I don't think it's a bad thing that they don't want to have kids.
Well, I guess we have to, maybe we're running into a question of
especially since we live in a society that can subsidize, we can subsidize a declining birth rate. You see a lot of other countries, first world countries, that they struggle with the birth rate, and the reason is because they don't have immigration to the scale that we do. Immigration is very helpful for us in repopulating and making sure that we don't get to a point where we're underpopulated. And underpopulation or a declining birth rate, or the negatives of that, an aging population, that's what I'm going to say, would be there are less younger people to pay.
Don't be afraid.
Dude, are you serious? Am I fucking gonna lose you? There are less younger people to pay taxes into services, basically, like Social Security and whatnot. So you need to make sure you have a balanced diet. You know what I mean? But you have to make sure you maintain that.
A godling.
Now you get to the real fundamental question.
I think it's a fundamental freedom thing.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing, I guess, on the freedom aspect of it, because again, I'm not saying that you should be required to have kids.
Well, but you're imposing your sensibilities,
Where did
what you think is important in life, to other people. But everybody has a different idea of what's important in life without hurting anyone. The thing is, what I'm saying is, these people that are married, that don't have children, they're not harming anyone.
What's wrong?
They're not harming these unborn children that they never have. They're not harming anyone.
Why?
And it doesn't affect your relationship with your family and your marriage at all.
Yeah, but I'm not imposing myself on them or harming them by answering a question about
Can I help you somehow?
About how I feel about their choices.
Right, but nor are gay people doing that to you.
I think the harm comes from, on a societal level, when we start breaking down these basic central institutions, like the institution of the family and marriage. That's where the harm comes from. And the more that people believe, the more that we build a society where it's believed that marriage is objectively meaningless, right? It's entirely subjective, it's just not making you feel better. The more that we build a society like that, I think that's where the harm comes in, the worse it is. People are going to reject marriage, and that means fewer kids are being born. Also, more kids are being born in a context where they don't have that stable family structure. So the harm definitely comes. It may not be this immediate, connect the dots thing, but we can already see that.
Interesting. That was the first bit. This next one is let's see what next. Let's start with. Okay, so this is Joe looking at Walsh. Is this an attack on the truth? What moment did trans go mainstream? Alright, that seems like the next logical one. Interested in seeing the whole trans argument. Let's see what we got here with that.
What's the moment when all this exploded into the mainstream? It was seeded into our institutions, and then there was a moment when it all became.
Was there a moment when trans moved into mainstream? I just kind of feel like this was maybe it evolved quickly. because like black activism is slow. That's like one of Dave Chappelle's jokes. That like gay activism seems to have much more quickly. It has to do with the advent of the internet. Let's be honest too. Some people can just pretend to be gay, and they can forcefully identify with a community, so more people can be included. You know what I mean? You can't pretend to be black. And then there's also more people who may have just kind of realized that, like, I don't know, gayness is like a little bit of a spectrum. I feel like this is how I always talk about it. Is that, like, here's your spectrum. We'll do like the gay to straight, and I think that everybody generally falls somewhere on this spectrum in like an indefinite way. So I'd say I'm like right here, right? And then based on the way that you're raised, I think it can make you a little bit more gay or a little bit more straight, right? I could see myself fucking like a femboy. You know what I mean? If I'm a little bit gay, I could be a little gay, but also if I was raised very conservatively, I think that I could be like fully straight. I think that there's a level of conditioning that can happen that can affect your sexuality. And I think that with a more like progressive society, you're seeing more people feel more comfortable identifying as more gay in some capacity. So there's more people in the movement. I also think that the internet, like the technology age, was very big and booming for it as well. There's a lot of different things.
Became mainstream. And I don't know if Bruce Jenner is the definite starting point, but I do think that was a pivotal moment. It was a pivotal moment, not just because now the media is selling.
Isn't it crazy? It's like it's attacking
writing this, but also because conservatives, had an opportunity right then and there to take a stand against this, to recognize it for what it is, for the threat that it is, and to take a firm stand. And I think so many conservatives didn't, because they just imagine that this is,
hey, what's the threat of Bruce Jenner fucking being trans? What's the threat? What? Get on 3 on Bruce Jenner. What are they talking about?
Either they don't want to get in trouble, we call it transphobe, they just thought it's sort of a sideshow, and so many conservatives basically ignored it.
I don't think anybody realized it was going to get this big.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't, but I mean, it should have been more clear. I guess woulda, coulda, shoulda, but it should have been more clear, because they're waging an assault on like basic fundamental reality, and so it goes way beyond. This is not just about gender. This is about reality. That's why in the film, every conversation I had with someone on that side of it, every single one devolved into this, well, what is truth, and who's truth, and how do you know what truth is?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in the same room as someone, but I can't get them to acknowledge that we exist in the same reality. We could share a room, but we don't share a reality. In the film, there's one woman that we talked to on the show.
What's the threat?
Just wondering. Street. And she was giving me this, we all have our own truth thing. And then I said, well, what if it's my truth that you don't?
Like, if you think that it's going too far too fast, like, that could be a thing. That's like, but that's for anything, especially with, like, somebody made a good point here. The internet accelerates the awareness of social issues, but at the same time, refugees don't judgment of the issue in some ways. Yeah, sometimes things can go a little too quickly without people really getting a grasp on, like, the true meaning of what's happening sometimes. And that's why I think something like the conversation about kids is a really good conversation to have, because I'm still not comfortable with it. I think it's a fair conversation for everybody to have, but that doesn't mean that like all trans is bad.
I'm looking for a young, passionate woman.
Exist. And she said, well, I don't exist.
Did I ever?
In the film, there's one woman that we talked to on the street, and she was giving me this, we all have our own truth thing. And then I said, well, what if it's my truth that you don't exist? And she said, well, then I don't exist. She was willing to erase her own existence, if that's how I perceive it.
Yes, I just
ran off towards your
it's a really bad interpretation of whatever actually happened.
Will she talk to you?
It's totally incoherent.
I found out about the reaction that people have to this, and how strongly they're committed to this. When there was a transgender fighter that was hiding the fact, Fallon Fox, was hiding the fact that they were biologically male and competed twice as a woman, beating the fuck out of these women.
Yeah,
and
that's why I think when we talk about trans people, the conversation that really needs to be had is more about like not about whether trans people are or aren't valid, but this is mostly a question about trans women, because trans women in sports can seriously hurt cisgender women, because you go through a male puberty, your is stronger than actual steroids. Even if you go on like hormone replacement therapy, it's not going to eradicate all the differences at all in any capacity. But this is why this conversation about like where do trans women fit in some spaces, right? Like, so the bathroom, I can understand why people are upset about bathrooms. There's a specific issue with women feeling unsafe around men. Trans women aren't men, but like the reality is a lot of trans women are not passable, and they can be perceived as men, and it can come off as a bit of a threat. you know. And so I can see why there's a conversation there. Sports absolutely taking away opportunities from other trans other cisgender women. I mean, if you're trans women, let's say that like 1% of the population is trans. Let's say only 1% of the trans women or women in sports are trans. That 1% is going to rise to the top, and they're going to deny opportunities because they're not going to be able. So, like, it definitely can displace cisgender women. Those are the questions. Those are the conversations to have. Like, what is it? Like, what are the concessions that need to be made? Where do we need to be nuanced? Like, for trans men or women, but like, they are different from cis women. Like, we need to acknowledge that sometimes that's necessary to talk about when it comes to dating. Not everybody wants to date a trans person. That's perfectly fine for them. You know, those are fair questions to bring up.
It's crazy. Like, you can't, and trying to say that it was just a medical procedure. And when I thought rightly got angry at it, I saw all these articles written, all these pieces about how transphobic my position was and what a horrible person I was. Like, we're literally talking about someone not telling someone. I said that, look, if you are a transgender athlete and you tell someone, hey, I was biologically male, now identify as a female, would you like to fight? And that person still says yes, all in. Go ahead, have fun.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, they actually, give them fair warning.
Just like I think you should be able to ride bulls and go dirt biking and skydiving, do whatever wild, dangerous shit you want to do. But to hide the fact that you're biologically male and you were a male for 30 plus years, that was madness to me. But they had already drawn this line in the sand, and I remember arguing with someone on Twitter about it. When this woman said she was always a woman, I go, even when this person impregnated a woman and had a child with them, she's like, even then. Like, even then.
Listen, I get what they're saying. They probably always identified as a woman. I get that, but that doesn't mean that like there isn't a very different like, you know, reality of the world there, where we have to understand that there's like a significant power imbalance. You know, it's the fact of the matter. You know,
she stuck her penis in a woman, got her pregnant.
That's a science.
Became
All
a father.
science, yeah.
And even that, during that act, she was a woman. Like, what is a woman? What the fuck are we talking about?
What they're really saying is that this person, they're talking about self-perception. Like, this person perceived himself that way.
So, like, when it comes to trans people, the overwhelming majority of trans people are, like, born trans in some ways. That's the reality. Ask any trans, even Blair White will say, like, I was born a woman. You know, when it comes to diagnosing and treating, you know, that's a whole other thing. That doesn't mean that we should necessarily always let kids, like, jump head first, and they're obviously... that's what they mean, that they were born in the wrong body. Like, I understand that. We have 7 billion people on the planet. Of course, not everybody's going to be born that's going in a way that they're going to align perfectly with the societal norms and societal expectations. I'm totally on board with that. That's what they mean. But even if they identified as a woman, they are still a biological man at that point, and they went through male puberty and they can seriously hurt somebody. That's what they meant. It's a bad counter argument, because just because they might have always been a gender woman, in their heart, I guess you would say, doesn't mean that they didn't have like very real world like developments as a man. And you know what sucks is that there's a lot of trans women. I'm sure that there are plenty of trans women who just want to compete in sports, but they don't want to displace cisgender women. Like, they just want to be seen as like women. They want to be seen as like, you know, it's just normal. Unfortunately, like, it's just you got to take an L. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that it's like to be cheeky or funny. It's just like sometimes in life it's just not going to be fair for you, and that sucks. Like, I don't think that like there's no trans woman who transitions so that they can like, oh, I'm going to do this just so that I can beat such and such just so I can lose this fucking game. I'm just going to transition just so I can beat so and so. You know what I mean? Nobody's doing that.
Somewhere in the process. I should look for it when I get home.
But self-perception is not always reality. Of course, we all in most other contexts we recognize that a person can have self-perception that just is not true. It's just inaccurate. I mean, you can walk down the street in any city and find drug-addled homeless people talking to themselves, and if you were to ask them about themselves, they're going to say a lot of things that just don't line up with reality.
I feel like you've never talked about this person, because I've never heard of them. Like, I mean, like, some people can have like significant mental health issues, for sure, but like, I don't know if you've ever actually talked to homeless people before.
No.
You've never heard about.
Not allowed.
Holy fuck.
Please, it's important.
Listen, when it comes to anything, I believe like gender dysphoria is still classified in the DSM as a mental like health condition or mental health issue, which I agree with it being classified as such. Right? The way that we operate, the problem is conservatives will use that to invalidate trans people. Here's how we operate any mental condition or any issue in any capacity, and this is what got me to be trans affirming. Is when you have a diagnosis of a thing, the way you treat that thing is the way that it helps the person best function in society without hurting society. Right? So a trans person, that has these significant mental health issues associated with their gender not aligning with their sex, the best way to have the most positive outcome for them in their society is to allow them access to gender-affirming care, right? Some kind of like therapy, guidance towards transitioning to whatever extent, while also reining in expectations. That's something that they're like a mental health, like a somebody who will help a trans person will help them understand. Usually they'll be like, hey, pick a person, go to the malls, pick a person, and then maybe start, or pick your ideal body, and then as we work towards that with hormones and whatnot, we'll also rein in your expectations so you don't feel yourself. Especially since it's incredibly expensive to transition, especially for trans women. It's more expensive to demasculinize somebody than to feminize somebody. Or no, it's more expensive to feminize somebody than to you get what I mean. More expensive to feminize a body than masculinize. I know a lot of people's first thing they're going to say is like, yeah, but the statistics don't show that, because actually there's the suicidality stays the same after transition. It doesn't. That statistic you're looking at doesn't define what's the end point for a transition. Like less than 1%, I think, of trans people actually are able to fully transition to the point that they're comfortable and happy with. Right? So it's like, oh, yeah, they started taking hormones and they still want to kill themselves. Yeah, that's not how things work. Right? You have to go through a huge process of taking hormones in order to get to the place that you might be happy with. Especially since you consider the fact that a lot of people, this goes to more depressed people, but depression can be a side effect of gender dysphoria. When you're struggling to identify and express yourself in the way that you feel on the inside, is that like when you get, let's say let's take a depressed person right here. Let's say somebody that's like super depressed, right? This is your right. I don't know if this is the grass can help me. What happens is when somebody is really depressed to the point where like they are completely lethargic and doing absolutely nothing, giving them treatment when it comes to medication and helping them have a positive outlook on life makes them less depressed and makes them less suicidal. Problem is that as their suicidality goes down, or as their energy meter goes up because they're getting the help that they need, and their suicidality goes down, there's going to be a point where they're going to still be suicidal, even if they're less suicidal, but they're now going to have the energy to do something about it. And that's one of the problems that can arise as well. As people tend to get better, sometimes they can almost relapse because now they have the energy. It's a real thing that people who are suicidal are just so depressed they don't have the energy to take their own lives. It's a lot of fucked up shit. So that's where it comes for that. A lot of people will compare it to pedophilia, thinking that that's like a dunk when it comes to treating people the best way for them in society. It's not, because that's harmful. Allowing pedophiles to sleep with children hurts children. Having trans people be trans doesn't hurt anybody in any capacity at all, right? So that's what really got me to be trans affirming. The only thing we lose in society is your penis might get hard when you look at a trans person. You might not know, man. That's you're gonna deal with your own internalized issues at that point. You know what I mean? It's just sometimes it just be like that, brother. You know what I mean? Sometimes it just be like that.
And in every other context, we're allowed to acknowledge that, even in medical context. I mean, someone who has body dysmorphia in the form of anorexia. A young woman goes to the doctor and she's 90 pounds, and she says, "I feel like I'm a 300-pound, fat ass."
Yeah.
The doctor's not going to affirm that and say, well, if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. Fatness.
No, because you don't understand mental health, because you're an idiot. So this is the problem. Like, he's not intelligent when it comes to this thing. The way that you treat somebody that's anorexic, it is not going to make them better if you think that their body, like, so let's say, like you said, a 90-pound woman comes in, I'm 300 pounds. They're at a point where they're like harming themselves, basically. You don't remedy that by allowing them to continue to engage in like being too skinny, because that'll kill them. That's not going to have a positive outcome. They will die. Death is a negative outcome. So like what it's disanalogous. Like what he's promoting, what he's presenting is disanalogous to like the reality of the world. He's not being honest or accurate. It's not comparable in the right way. Like we said, the way that you engage in like dealing with mental health issues is you engage in a way where you have the best outcome for the person overall. That's it.
Nice.
This is on a spectrum. I mean, they're not going to give her diet pills. They're going to.
But why gender? Like, why is gender this ideological battleground? Like, how the fuck did that become this thing where it's encouraging this cult-like mentality where you cannot, even if things are clearly odd, they clearly don't make any sense. They don't.
What's the oddity that doesn't make sense?
Forgive me.
Like with the whole trans women's sports, I get that, but outside of that, what does he mean?
They don't fit with logical reality. You have to adhere to whatever this ideology is promoting.
They be harsh.
I think it's.
They're fair.
I mean, at the most basic level, I think that this is, like I said, it's an attack on truth, and this is, if you want to, if your project is is relativism, and you want to get rid of objective ideas of truth, what are you going to go after? You're going to go after someone's really fundamental understanding of themselves. It's not just that they're attacking reality; it's like they're attacking the reality of the self, and so they're depriving a person of the ability to understand their own themselves. And once you do that, if you're successful on a societal level,
under the tree.
Well, my question is like, do you think that maybe these people actually feel this way? They actually were born. Because here's the thing: there's genetic components, and there's also like womb components that would cause somebody to be trans, right? There could be like some kind of, you could call it a defect in some capacity. I don't know if you call it a defect, or in the womb there's like a hormone washing that could like have a profound impact on causing somebody to be trans. But the thing is like when it comes to like the way you're talking about it, it's an attack on truth. So then what you'd have to do is you'd have to engage in a conspiracy narrative that somebody wants to make people trans to hurt the world, which is just not what's happening. Because they're just trans people just happen to exist. You have like it's a very weird, bizarrely like negative perspective on that, which I guess I'm not surprised on.
The sky's the limit. You can go anywhere from there.
So do you think this is like a conscious decision, or do you think this is just something that people have adopted because it seems to be the ideology du jour?
I think it depends on who you're talking about. I mean, at an institutional level, I think a lot of it's conscious. Some of the people that I talked to in the film, I think that they know that this doesn't make any sense and that it's wrong. And I think because they have to know it. If you're a doctor, you do have a basic understanding of male and female. You must. You wouldn't have been able to get through medical school if you don't. So I think that for them it's intensely ideological.
Right, but it's a mental health issue. Like gender dysphoria, being trans is a mental health issue. It's like almost completely non-physical. I'd say it's very much has to do with. I mean, there's probably like estrogen hormones that have to have like an impact on it in some capacity, but it's a mental health issue. So like you're aware that this is like different from, I guess you'd say, physical health, right? Like it's not the same thing. When you say they must do that, you have a very limited understanding of what you're even talking about.
Well, it's also profit driven. They make a lot of money off of this. If a 6-year-old boy says, "I feel like I'm a girl," and the response to the boy is, "No, you're a boy, and that's what you are, and that's okay," and he'll get over it, it's just a phase, and he'll live a normal life, and that's fine. But there's no money in that. Whereas if you encourage the delusion, now that boy individually is worth millions of dollars down the line to therapists and doctors.
And well, first of all, you can end this problem by making universal health care. Then there wouldn't be for-profit medicine, and we'd all be all good. Second of all, there are, especially now that there's more awareness for trans people, there are the 6-year-olds who will falsely say, "Oh, I'm a boy," or "I'm a girl." It's just going to happen. For me, if I had my own kid and I had like my 6-year-old visit or a biological boy, they're like, "Daddy, I'm a girl," I'd be like, "Okay." I'd either say, I'd say no, you're not. My wife's like, "Yeah," I'd just say, "Okay," and then you ignore it. And then you'd see what goes from there. And if they keep saying it, now they're 8, okay. Let's say they get older and older, they start to go through puberty, and all of a sudden maybe they're still saying it. Then I'm going to take them to like a fucking mental health professional. You know what I mean? But like, it's not as simple as like just say no. Again, any trans person, every single trans person that's an adult was trans when they were a kid. They identified as trans as a kid. They were exploring their feelings and they went through like an issue. That doesn't mean that we have to over-affirm every kid, but we should take it seriously. It's not as easy as some people say, but there are also conversations about detransitioning where people do get it wrong. I have a detransitioning friend who said it was very easy for them to start hormone treatments when they said that they had gender dysphoria. And the doctors will affirm it. You're absolutely, these are issues that can happen. To what degree, I don't really know. But it's not as simple as just say no and it goes away. I think this is the problem, is that you think that it's just like, just say no, it goes away. No, that's not what happened. This is not a practical, realistic thing that's happening. And saying it's profit-driven, that's fucking insane. Like, people will take advantage of things financially, but what you're saying is that people are intentionally misdiagnosing people as trans so that they can make money. I just don't think that that's the case. That's an incredible conspiracy narrative that you couldn't like support that argument with any logic or facts in any capacity outside of conspiracy. Like, you have no actual like grounded argument on that. It's a conspiracy, and it's really shitty, and it's meant to be anti-trans.
Psychologists and surgeons and everything. So I think it's profit driven. And then there's also just a lot of actual confusion out there. People don't really understand what's going on. And then there's cowardice too. People are just terrified. I've certainly seen a lot of that. People just are scared shitless about being accused of bigotry, losing their social media platforms, losing their jobs, losing their friends. I get this question all the time everywhere I go. well, how do I deal with this at my job? Because if I reveal that I understand reality at my job, I'll lose my job.
How do you do what at your job? The only thing that a job's going to have you do is correctly pronounce somebody. Like you're not going to get shot and quartered in the street. They just a lot of times what jobs are boiling it down to a lot now is that like you have to put is usually you'll have to like in your email you might have to put your pronouns. It's not that big of a deal. Like you'll survive. Like you're not going to die because you had to say that you're she or in your fucking pronoun, like in your bio. It's really not that big of a deal. Because now we're dealing with adults. We're not dealing with kids anymore. This is the problem. We're talking about at the workplace where I have a 30-year-old trans coworker. Okay, like they're fucking adult. They're trans. Like it's not the same as a kid making this decision. So like you just don't want to believe trans people exist, and then okay, that's just your fucking problem.
Lose my fan.
I think some surgeons are for profit when it comes to that stuff. There's a lot of trans people that have had horrible botched surgeries because the surgeons didn't care. Okay, but that has nothing to do with diagnosis. You usually can't get like a surgery, and maybe you can without that's not like the issue isn't the surgeries. The issues would start with the diagnosis more than anything else. And you're just saying that some trans people have botched surgeries because the surgeons don't care. It's probably not true. Because surgeons work off of success rates. No surgeon's going to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to fucking not give a shit about any surgery because I don't care. Like you heard something from a person and you have no actual information on that source. Surgeons are usually very careful. A lot of times they'll stay away from cases that they feel they'll fail on because they know it looks better for their numbers. Again, like where are you getting this information from? TikTok? I mean, you know, be very careful about that kind of stuff.
Family, this is what people are dealing with.
And it is what people are dealing with. That really is what's happening, which is one of the more confusing aspects of this, is that there's no logical discussion about this. It's just you are either on the good side or you're a bigot, and that's the binary.
Yeah, and that's because they know that they can't, the people that are pushing this stuff know.
Matt Walsh is a bigot. He's literally not trying to have the conversation. I can see Joe Rogan is like a normal dude just trying to suss shit out, but Matt Walsh is...
They can't defend it. They can't defend it intellectually.
They can't.
They also feel like they shouldn't have to.
Some people might. All right, let's go on to the next clip, which is Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh. Are these trans teens the guinea pigs of woke ideology? Should we do that one next, or we'll do this one.
The other thing to keep in mind too is that there are men who are just gaming the system, as you point out. I think in prison that happens a lot because they'd rather be in women's prison than men's prison.
There's very few people gaming the system. Nobody's saying that they're trans to game the system. I've heard of trans women in female prisons, which is another great conversation to have, because if they're not taking their hormones and whatnot, they could be a significant power imbalance. Like absolutely, that's definitely a conversation to have. But there's nobody actually gaming the system in any way where it's like, oh my god, this is a huge problem. Okay, nobody people when you say fundamentally gaming the system, there's nobody that's like, I'm going to be trans just so I can compete. Because a lot of them that you have to still go through a certain amount of hormone replacement or hormone therapy, which will have a significant impact on them. Nobody's doing that just for the lulz or for fucking life.
But also in general, there are different categories of people who transition. We kind of talk about them like they're all the same, but they're not. And you can kind of break it down by age. There's the very young children, a 5-year-old, and we hear that, oh, my 5-year-old is trans. That's 1,000% the parent just decided to do that. No child even knows what that is.
Sure, I would. Generally speaking, they can be just very impressionable. Okay, I kind of agree with that. Sure.
So you have to suggest that to them. Then you have the adolescent girls, and Abigail Schreier's this in your book. And that's the socialization they pick it up from society. But then there's the older men who are adults and decide one day that they're women. And for so many,
it's never how it works. Nobody just decides that they're a woman. It's usually a very long process of coming to terms with it. It's not like this basic, very easy, conscious decision that people just make. So again, fundamental lack of understanding what it's talking about.
Then this is a fetish. I mean, this is like the thing we're not allowed to say or acknowledge, but it's totally true. That for most older men who decide that I'm a woman, it's a fetish. It's autogynephilia.
Yes.
What? It's totally true. That for most of these older men who decide that I'm a woman, it's a fetish. It's autogynephilia.
Yes. What do you mean, yes? Joe Rogan said yes to that? That's preposterous. I was with Joe up until that point. You think that most people who identify as trans later in life, they're just men engaging in a fetish? Why are you a fucking idiot? That's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. Maybe that exists, but that is not the fucking general case. What are you talking about? You have to live under a fucking rock to think that. That's insane. I can't believe Joe Rogan would be like, yeah, sure. Like, you actually co-signed that dumb fucking perspective? Or is he just saying yes as like agreeing that he said a thing? What?
Enchanted by the idea of themselves as women. And so now we have to participate in your fetish. Like you get off on the idea of being seen as a woman, and I have to be a participant in that. It's really it's really degrading to all of us. You know, that we're all being forced into that.
Well, it's always been a psychological condition. It's always been known as being like a psychiatric condition. Like it's a mental health issue.
Yeah, sure.
And now it's being accepted as a gender identity issue. Where it was always just like a weird kink that people have. And now you're again, regardless whether or not this person's a sex offender, registered sex offender, repeated sex offender, you have to accept this. Otherwise, you're a bigot. It's just...
Am I missing context here? Maybe there are people like that, but it sounds like they're suggesting that's most people who's trans.
There's something about having a #1 hit. And show the world you love you. It does something to a person. Keep giving all the love you can. After your first #1, can't wait for the next one.
Now the race is on and here comes pride of the backstretch.
You live in a fast world.
Fast is the only speed I know. Stand me with that. You make me an honest man.
Make me an honest woman.
You bet. My heart's out of the Joe Solo stuff is flatline. I should have done more to stop it. You can't stop her unless her beauty.
You can't bear happiness.
Nobody wants me happy.
I do. Sometimes it's hard to be a woman.
Trans? It's always been a mental health issue. Just because something's a mental health issue doesn't make the person invalid. Like, everybody has like a different like list of mental disorders or mental health issues that would cause them to need specific targeted help in order to help them succeed in society. That's all it's ever been about. And you deal with each one.
Alright, I'm just gonna ignore this guy, because he's just going to keep rehealing
right? Like, there are people with
infinitely now. I do not know why.
So how do you deal with that? You have to like teach them
So
coping
fuck
techniques
him.
and, like express their anger negatively. Because angry people
Get the fuck away from me, you piece of
usually
fucking
their anger
filth.
is justified to be angry.
I'm
They
just
have
done with you
disproportionate
now.
reactions. Anxiety and panic attacks. Another thing that you would do. Like, we give people like fucking service dogs that they're allowed to go into the hospitals and doctors' offices and the local Wendy's without question. You know, body dysmorphia, all these different things, depression. We have we just treat them based on what's the best for them in society. No one is becoming trans. Like, nobody's like fucking becoming trans just to jerk off themselves. And if they are, it's not even close to representative of the majority of trans people. What a silly thing to say. Holy fuck. Okay.
Just this rigid adherence to ideology is so cult-like. It's so fucking Handmaid's Tale. It's so wild that people are just wholesale adopting this. And this is not to deny that there's people that are trans. I've met people that are trans. Yeah. It exists in nature. I mean, occasionally guys will shoot a buck and they'll find out it's actually a female with antlers. Nature's weird, right? I think nature does put people.
Well, that's like the difference between somebody who's transgender or somebody who's like intersex in some capacity. Those are two different things.
For whatever reason, that really feel like they should have been born a female or should have been born a male. But that's not all of what's happening. And in our desire to be compassionate and to have care for these people and to love these people and respect these people, we're opening the door to all this chaos. And I think that's what you highlight so well in this film.
No, he doesn't. There's like, again, you can see like, okay, Joe Rogan has like a nuanced take. Matt Walsh doesn't have a nuanced take. It's all anti-trans. There's no common sense, like reasonably minded conversation that Matt Walsh is trying to have. What are you talking about, Joe? Like, this is the problem. I have no problem with the conversation with Matt Walsh, but you're not getting any pushback. You're running defense for this guy to make it seem like he's like, yeah, you're just trying to have that nuanced chat. No, he's not. He's not having a nuance. He just doesn't give a fuck about trans people. That's not accurate. What you're saying is it's just so stupid. That's fucking crazy, dude. Okay.
And it's so strange to me how so many people on the left, people that I, before this, I generally respected their opinion, just buy into it wholesale and will spout out things as if they're facts about how much this helps people and keeps people from killing themselves and helps kids. Like, it's not,
okay, so then what's the counter argument? Like, you have to be more specific. You're so vague.
Not true.
Yeah, it's not true. And the suicide stuff is it's just so sinister because this is the emotional blackmail they tell parents.
No.
That's
when it comes to kids, I can understand. Like, I understand that we need to have that conversation. But the suicide stuff fundamentally is very real. We just talked about it. Like, there'll be a reduction in suicidality if you're able to, go through the gender-affirming care that you need. Again, not advocating for kids to go through it. I'm just talking about this at a fundamental level. And again, like, the statistics are misrepresented when it's like, oh, well, it doesn't actually reduce suicidality because if you look, people are still, like, suicidal efforts. Again, there's no actual target for, like, what is transitioning. They'll be like, yeah, well, this person started going on hormones and they didn't become less suicidal. Well, see, it doesn't work. That's not the whole treatment. It takes years of shit. What is he talking about? Like, what do you mean?
Daughter identifies as your son now, and then the now classic line is, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? Like, you have to affirm this or your daughter's going to kill himself. And so many parents, especially, you go back a couple of years when this conversation wasn't being had on a very visible level, they don't know what to do. They're panicked, and they've just been told by a mental health provider who they trust that if they don't go along with their child.
I don't think that, like, mental health providers are the ones who say this is a fucking big strong man to me. Because most mental health, I just doubt that mental health advocate or experts are like, yeah, your daughter's going to kill themselves if you don't help them. That's happening in there are very toxic people who are trans advocates, mostly cisgender people who like to scream, that might be saying it could kill it. It could, in some cases. It depends on the severity of it. Everybody's going to be different. If your kids are starting to go through this issue, they're not going to instantly, like, just fucking off themselves, right? But, like, this isn't, mental health professionals aren't going around and saying this in any wide scale. I just doubt that. Like, what's your source for that? Like, I doubt, I'm sure it might happen, but is it on a wide scale? I very highly doubt that, like, mental health professionals are like, yeah, your kid's going to kill themselves if they don't get this care. Like, I doubt it. They can say, like, your kid might be experiencing significant stress. But as a parent, if your kid's at that point, you'll recognize it, and that's why you'd be more empathetic to it. That's why I say I pray to God that I never have a trans kid, because it's what a difficult conversation and decision to make, partially for your kid, when it comes to helping them transition, if that's something that you may want to do, because you're going to see the negative impacts of them, not being able to express themselves in a way that would make them happy, because you're going to see your kid depressed. Papa Schill, he actually has a point. There are about healthcare administrators who are making money off all this. It's just, you're just wrong. Like, people make money, that doesn't mean that there's, like, a negative. That doesn't mean that everything is sinister. Like, just because Walmart makes money when I go there and I buy food doesn't mean that Walmart is trying to poison me to death, right? You have to understand this. And again, if you made, like, if we could just make universal health care and that, like, profit margin goes away, and then you have no more argument, right? Like, he's not making a big point. You're latching on to this point. Oh, okay. You're triggering me, so I'm just going to put you in timeout. Stop, please. Listen, I'm going to respond to these better. You have every right to disagree with me, but don't say maintain nuance with these takes. Because you disagree with me doesn't mean I'm not being nuanced. Maybe you're wrong, and you're shitting and coming right now. So I'm going to take that as disrespect. Maintain your disagreement without trying to be provocative, because you're trying to. That's a provocative statement to make. Okay, I'm working on my reactions to that. The next reaction is just going to be to ban you from the chat. I'm maintaining plenty of nuance. I've talked about these topics for a long time. I'm constantly maintaining nuance. What you're doing is, like, you just popped in here and you're just being stupid. I'm sorry. You can disagree. That doesn't make you stupid, but the way that you're expressing it is just to try to get me to click on it. So, that's annoying. All right? It's very annoying when you do shit like that.
Kyle's delusion that their child's going to commit suicide. So I can understand when you're told that you're going to kind of panic, but it's not true. The evidence, in fact, tells us the opposite, that suicidality, we cover this in the film, Scott Nugent mentions it, that the only reliable long-term study we have on this shows that suicidality is the highest years after transition. That's the highest point of suicidality among trans people.
Again, what is the referencing? What is after transition mean? Years after transition, is that socially transitioning, where you're just socially transitioning? Is that when you first start therapy? Is that when you first start hormone treatment? Because it takes a year. I think you have to be on, like, certain hormones for a year before you go on to the next level of hormones. They're all over the place. You can't just say after transition. The percentage of people who actually complete transition, where they go through hormone surgeries to the degree that they want, it's like $110,000, is so small. Like, that you can't make that assertion. It's a dishonest statistic for him to be pushing forward. He's not being honest about what he's saying.
Well, the other problem too is that there are a couple of maybe reliable long-term studies, but there aren't that many because we haven't done this to people on this scale ever before in human history.
Yeah, like that's the unfortunate reality. So this is another thing that people need to understand. And it's just unfortunate, and it's potentially fucked. Is that like we have no statistic, we have no long-term study on this. We have nothing to really reference ourselves from here. It's just the unfortunate reality, and sometimes you have to like almost experiment. It sucks, you know. And you can't experiment on animals because like animals don't have engaged in the same mental health that we do. It's unfortunate that a lot of this is just going to be experimentation for a while. It's just the unfortunate reality, and we're not going to be able to get accurate statistics until this is something that's been going on for a while. That's just life. I mean, it's not ideal, but it is to its extent. It just is what it is, and it's not. I hate to say it, but it's kind of the truth. Sometimes it just is what it is. It is what it is, man. And that is one of the potential dangers, which is why like I'm apprehensive about doing it for children, because like we don't know. There's no way we could know.
So the current crop of especially trans, quote unquote trans kids, they're the guinea pigs. We're experimenting on them. And they're making a lot of, the healthcare providers are making a lot of promises about how this is going to turn out when they can't possibly know this because we've never done it before.
What I will say though is not for nothing, but like when it comes to like I'm more inclined to believe a healthcare professional about an issue like this than some fucking random person who doesn't really like trans people. You know what I mean? Like two very different sources of information here. You know.
It might be time to get a new mattress when your phone recharges overnight, but you never do. At Bears Furniture, we have the technology to find your mattress match at an unbeatable price. It might be time to go to Bears.
South Florida's newest Chevrolet showroom is now open at Rick Hendrick Chevrolet Naples. Visit the newly redesigned state-of-the-art facility. Enjoy our most comfortable car buying experience yet at Rick Hendrick Chevrolet Naples.
I mean, like, the healthcare professional is probably more right than Matt Walsh is. I think it's great to be skeptical all the time about everything. You should always be skeptical about everything. I think that's a great thing to do because you don't want to, like, you don't want to go too far over a firm. But that doesn't mean that the everyman knows what the fuck he's on about. You know what I mean? And I can respect it because I'm, like, an everyman as well. But, like, it doesn't mean that we know what the fuck we're talking about in every situation. You know what I mean? I'm never going to go to a mechanic and tell them what's wrong with my car. You know what I mean? It's one of those situations. It's good to be skeptical. Absolutely. Take it to another person. Get a second, third opinion. But
that's one of the more sinister aspects of it for me, is the way they're encouraging hormone blockers and hormone transition for people that are going through puberty or haven't gone through puberty.
I'm sure that makes me nervous as well.
We don't have any long-term studies on this, and now they're finding that these hormone blockers aren't innocuous and that they cause a lot of health problems. And
they could. What health problems do they absolutely cause is the question. I've never been able to get like a solid answer on that, which is I think problematic. Long-term negative impacts hormone blockers. The problem is that I don't think that you would be on hormone blockers permanently. You go on hormone blockers for a time and then you go on so like here it is. There are no known irreversible risks of puberty blockers. And I think that the biggest reason is because this is very new. And that like you're on them so short term until you start potentially transitioning. But like Blair White brings up a good question as a trans woman. They're like, if you go on the hormone blocker, you may never be able to get like get a bottom surgery as a trans woman, where they would like basically invert your penis because your penis doesn't grow enough. There could be potential long-term fertility issues. I don't know if you'd attribute that to hormone blockers. There are things, and these are the questions that you can't really, like, how do you approach a fucking 12-year-old about, hey, maybe you shouldn't go on this because you might not ever be able to have kids or be able to have a vagina. I don't know if these things are confirmed. Again, these are definitely things that we should talk about. Yeah, so like Lupron, one of the drugs widely used as a puberty blocker, has been reported to have long-term adverse effects in women who use it to treat preconscious puberty. The problem is that you're not going to be on Lupron in a long-term capacity, right? So that's why these like you wouldn't be on this for a long time. You would block your puberty. Let's say you're a young biological boy, and so you think you're trans, you're 12 years old, you go on a puberty blocker. You're not going to maintain, I believe, you're not going to maintain that puberty blocker for the rest of your life. You're going to go on that until you go through another hormone change to I guess engage in like a female puberty. So you might only be on it for like maybe a year. So we have like, you know, it's not necessarily dangerous. And then it's a question of like, okay, well, as I'm not saying it's necessarily safe, but it's not necessarily like super dangerous, or these long-term effects aren't necessarily going to come into play. Then the question comes down to, even if there are long-term effects, it's up to the parents and those children, I guess. Again, I don't think kids should be taking it, but in this disease, whether those are worth it, right? So if your kid really is significantly struggling to the point where they hate themselves and they actually like really want to take their own lives, it might be better for them to have a long-term negative side effect that would be better than what it is now, right? So and that's how every medication works. I'm on metformin, which is a diabetic drug. I need some low blood sugar. That helps me. But at the end of the day, it's also can have a negative effect on your kidneys. But like, if I don't take it short term, I'm gonna have like system failure, right? So like, it's one of those things where every medication is a weighing of like, you know, it's a weighing of consequences. 1 year, that's not that short. No, but it's not. It wouldn't be under the label of long term when it comes down to it. Just so you know, like, so these are like, they're talking about long term, like over the course of tens of years, that these people will be on puberty blockers for when it comes to like women using it to treat other issues. Pieces. Okay.
They're saying this now out in the open, when people have been for years, the last few years, promoting this as if it's a pause button.
And it's just absurd, because that's not how human biology works. No, I think there's a lot of what they claim. Intuitively, it doesn't make any sense. It defies common sense. Even before you look at the data, and then you look at the data and you realize that it doesn't make any sense. But even before that, you can't. What's being?
Well, truly speaking, like, what data are you? Like, this is one of the problems. What data is Matt Walsh referencing? Because I'm doing my best to like be open about the data that I'm trying to talk about. Like, what is he referencing when he says like the data's out there? Because I just googled it and I'm not seeing any long term. Like, I would like genuinely like to see like a long term study that satisfies what he's saying, that like affirms what he's saying. Like, I would like to hear it if it exists. Of course, I want to hear it.
You can kind of put a child in a state of suspended animation where they're kind of lingering on pause. That's not how the human body works. What you can do is try to suppress the human body's normal natural functions, but when you do that, it's a trade-off. There are consequences. There are always consequences. That's how nature works. And we also know that one of the drugs they use, like Lupron, is a drug they use as a puberty blocker, and it's just a fact that this drug, number one, to begin with, is a cancer drug, originally for older men who have prostate cancer, and they've also used it to chemically castrate sex offenders. They didn't take it Georgia. They used it for that. So it's an actual chemical castration drug.
Well, yeah, but that's what the desire is to effectively
honest pay for their protection. So all
use off-label for 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old kids
with no long-term data, right? And they're promoting it as just
they would have long-term data. Okay, so here's the problem. This is one of the things that like debunks some of what they're saying on everything. If you're saying that we have a drug, Lupron,
must seek his own protectors.
Wait, did he say that Lupron was mainly for men? Because like it's mainly for women. We just looked into this. Hold on a second.
This chemical castration originally for older men blocker, and
we said originally. Okay. Lupron was invented in 1985, right? So if we've been using it since 1985, we have long-term studies on what it does, right? But again, the kids aren't taking it long-term. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be other negative outcomes. We already talked about like lack of development to be able to have bottom surgery, potentially making it so that they can't have, get pregnant because you can't like, it's not like how are you going to, because a lot of people who are trans that want to have kids, they have to detransition to an extent to be able to like produce again. Same thing with like powerlifters that are on steroids. They have to stop taking like fucking like tests and shit so that they can produce again. It takes a little while to do, but you can produce again. So, like, if you didn't go through, if you as a trans woman didn't develop, like, your penis and testes correctly because you didn't go through male puberty, you may never be able to have kids. These are real situations, right? But the Lupron itself has a long-term data on it, and that's probably what they're referring to. So the drug itself probably isn't going to have a long-term negative impact. It's the series of everything. It's not just the Lupron. It's the other hormones going forward. It's all these other issues, right? When it comes down to that.
because they can't be.
They're promoting it as this is the silver bullet. This is going to fix you.
Right.
This is the thing that's going to fix all.
The mainstream is doing that, but we have to be very careful about like operating as if like everything mainstream is like everybody's presenting that. Most doctors are like mainstream that are like with any type of political agenda. A lot of them are just trying to help people. I wouldn't say that like everybody's saying it's all your ails.
And the other thing they do is they say that, well, we don't. Because as this conversation has grown about actual surgery for children, which is happening all across the country, they always say that, well, it's not.
Is that actually happening? Because that's definitely way too far. It is. It's not really happening. Surgery for kids. What does he mean by that? That's such a. What does he mean? Gender. Cisgender hormones, potential access to gender-affirming surgeries are available at 16, and then in that case, transmasculine youth. Okay, so it's 16. Yeah, I'm not really completely on board with that. Its current guidelines suggest 16 years old. Looks like. I think that's too young for sure. I would agree with that, but it doesn't seem like it's below 16. I think we need to make age of consent in general like 18, but there are states where it's like 16. It's like crazy as shit. Yeah, I'd say that's too low. So like 16-year-olds and up are able to do that. Okay.
Especially younger kids. It's puberty blockers, not surgery. And yeah, it might be true that they're not performing actual surgeries on 12-year-olds at this point. You know, at least that's not a common practice.
Well, okay. So this is the things that you have to be like really careful about. This like dishonesty they just said.
It's not, you know, that's not really what's happening. Especially younger kids, it's so, for children. Which is they say that, well, we don't. As this conversation has grown about actual surgery for children, which is happening all across the country, but what they always say is that, well,
performing trans surgeries on 12-year-olds? I don't think so. I don't think that's... He's just lying at that point to try to make it as sinister as possible.
You tried to kill her.
Like, he knows what he's saying when he says shit like that. That's really dangerous. Like... Absolutely, I agree. 16 seems too young for surgery to me. But for him to suggest that they're doing it to like 18-year-olds and 12-year-olds there, even if it's just not mainstream enough, we're not hearing about it, that's like really insidious to me. Like, that's obviously very wrong and dishonest.
But what they don't tell you is that once you put the kid on this conveyor belt, they're going to probably stay on it all the way to the surgery. You put them in the system, you put them on, it's like a conveyor belt system, and they're most likely not going to start with puberty blockers. In almost every case, it's going to lead to hormone therapy, and then in a great many cases, they go from there to surgery.
Well, that's the whole point, but like, it doesn't mean they're going to happen when they're a kid, right? Like, he's trying to assert that's like, yeah, this is what's going to, like, yes, when you go to therapy and then you go on hormone blockers and then you go on, like, the goal is generally to get surgery. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get it.
Densified from Crest Pro Health. Like your bones, your teeth lose density over time. Crest Densified works to fill microscopic weak spots and actively rebuilds tooth density to extend the life of teeth. Crest, the #1 toothpaste brand in America.
It's as easy as click, claim, go. Get $500 cyber cash on select popular Chevy models. Plus, get an additional $1,500 total cash allowance on all 2022 Silverado pickups with a 2.7-liter turbo engine.
Be able to get it as a child, and he's trying to assert that you would. But if you started doing hormone blockers at 12, which again, on the fence about there, that doesn't mean that you're going to get surgery by 13. It means that like that's the whole kind of point, right? Like if you're treating someone with gender dysphoria, the end goal is generally going to be some kind of surgery. It could be hormone surgery, therapy. Like he's not actually. That's obviously what's going to happen. Like that's just what's going to happen. Not everyone wants bottom surgery. That's true, but like bottom surgery is the only surgery. Like there's top surgery, bottom surgery. There's like feminization, different surgeries. There's like vocal cord surgery. There's like hair implant surgery. There's cheekbone surgeries. There's a lot of different things. There's like laser treatments. There's a lot of shit all over the place.
The thing too is that as they're going along with these drugs, you are taking away. You're sterilizing them. You're oftentimes permanently taking away their future fertility.
Potentially, sure.
So,
yeah.
You've taken away their capacity to, like a girl. You've made it so she'll never be able to have kids in the future.
You've made it so she may never be able to have kids in the future. I don't know that we have anything that says you can't. I feel like, because I was saying that it might. I'm saying might on purpose because I don't know for sure. It makes sense to me. I know what to look up for this. search. Have kids in the future. Because I feel like when it comes to, like, like right here, is taking puberty blockers alone should not affect your ability to have babies in the future. Yeah, but we're not just talking about puberty blockers. We're talking about, like, a trans-affirming surgery could potentially do that. Puberty blockers alone should not affect this. So that means that there could be a fertility issue. Absolutely. I don't think you can assert that it would absolutely have one, because I'm pretty sure you're born with all your eggs as a woman, right? So it could definitely have a negative impact for sure. I just wouldn't assert that as a fact. That's why I didn't assert it as a fact.
You've already taken that from her. She has given it up before she even could know that she's given it up. And then for her, it's kind of a logical process. Well, I've already given that up, so I might as well go get the double mastectomy, and then all down the line.
That is the dumbest thing I've heard him say. Wait, hold on. Okay, listen. So what he's saying right there is that because they're not going to be able to have kids, now they're just going to be like, well, I might as well lean into this thing and just get the double mastectomy. Nobody, dude. That's, first of all, oh my god. What he's trying to say, this is like the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. Nobody's going on puberty blockers and then going like, oh, I've had irreversible damage, I might as well cut my tits off, basically. That's not what happened. That's what's happening. It's just not what's happening. People are getting the surgery in conjunction with it, but they're not like, oh, I'm in too deep, I might as well become a girl. That's not what's happening. That's what he's trying to assert. Yeah, some trans man will start going through the surgery, and now that he's they are irreparably damaged by his logic, they're just going to get their tits cut off and be like, I might as well commit to this. Like, no, that's not what's happening. There can be misdiagnoses, but like generally, this is like a very long-term methodical process done by mental health professionals to make sure that they reduce the likeliness of people being incorrectly diagnosed. Of course. I'd say a bigger issue is the potential for young people to diagnose themselves and then like look up the different symptoms and then go to the doctor and be like, I have gender dysphoria, because like some kind of a weird trend. Like, I don't even know if that's happening. That might be a little bit of a crazy thing I'm saying, but that's what I would be more hesitant about, more than anything else. But okay, interesting. And then we got this last one here. Joe Rogan. Jordan Peterson was right about woke insanity. Saw this coming miles away.
First started talking about compelled speech and compelled use of pronouns. I remember people thinking, like, why do you care about this? This is like such a small issue with a marginalized group of people. Like, let them have their identity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters. People want to like have their gender.
Let's go.
It's not too much of an issue with that. Okay. I don't think Papa God realizes how much someone's trans identity becomes entwined in their life, their friends, family. Okay, are you trans? This is a really quick question, because if you're not trans, then you don't know any more or less than I do about transness. So like that, of course, nobody's going to know that, but that doesn't mean that what I'm saying is inherently false in any capacity. Are you trans? Are you trying to tell me a particular experience that you have with your transness, or are you just trying to suggest that what I'm saying must be inaccurate because I'm not a trans person? Like, I don't understand. It just sounds like an unrealistic expectation. You're trying to present a lose-lose, but anything that I say must be wrong because I'm not trans, basically. Okay.
And use the pronouns they want, and, you know, this is like, what was it, 2015, 2016? And I remember his warning, and I remember many other people, like, this is going to spill over. Like, this, if you can enforce this on a professor, and if you can enforce compelled speech, because Canada doesn't have the same free speech laws we do in America. Yeah. And if you can, like, where does it go? How are you compelling it? Well, it means through violence, or through police, or through the fear of being arrested, the fear of having your job taken away from you. Like, this is literally...
Yeah, you shouldn't be arrested for this job. But if a job wants to be trans-affirming and you're not listening to your job, I mean, I don't... Okay, like, whatever. Like, I don't give a shit about that. Like, it's, their job's allowed to do whatever they want.
What happens when you use laws to compel people, like, you have to have some sort of a punishment if they don't follow through, if they don't follow your orders. And this is what he was worrying about. And I remember at the time being like, I hope he's wrong. Like, I hope it doesn't get that big. But now here we are, 7 years later,
yeah,
and he was right.
Because there's also a difference between telling people they can't say something, which is what free speech suppression usually is, and that's bad enough. But then telling people that they have to say something,
yes,
compelling them to actually say something, putting words in their mouth and telling them you have to say this, And it's not just pronouns. It's not a small thing, because when you use the she for a he, you're not only being forced to say something, but you're being forced to affirm and acquiesce to a claim that you don't agree with. You're being forced to express a belief that's not yours. I mean, it's like it's not much different from a dictatorship forcing someone to profess belief in a religion. It's forced conversion, basically, is what it is. And
it's not it at all. I mean, listen, again, I don't think you should force people to legally to say these things, but forced conversion is a complete ideological difference. Like, if I force you to go from being like Muslim to a Christian, like, I'm completely forcing you to change your entire perspective on life. If I'm telling you that you have to call somebody a girl when they're like a biological boy, that is not at all the same. You're not having like a significant issue with that. Okay.
And once you allow that, it doesn't matter. Of course, it's going to start somewhere small. It's just pronouns. It always starts that way. But like I said, it's actually not small. Pronouns there's a reason why the left makes a big deal out of it. So anytime people on the right say, it's not a big deal, in response to the left making a big deal about something, well, they wouldn't be making a big deal about it if it wasn't a big deal. And the fact that they're choosing this hill to defend should tell you that there's something here worth fighting.
My kid was going to school with a girl who was a they-them. She decided she was a they-them. And she demanded that they talk in they-them way. Like, you had to use, when you were referring to her as a plural. This girl wore makeup, dressed like a girl, just decided that she was a they-them, and would get angry if you misgendered her, and not calling her a plural.
Yeah, and what does that mean? So we have enough of a problem getting someone who identifies as a woman to tell us what a woman is, but right. So,
yeah, so, like, listen, some of the non-binary stuff can be a little bit bizarre. I mean, especially with kids. There might be kids that are just, like, experimenting with their gender or whatever. I don't really give a shit. I don't know, man. When it comes to, like, these young people doing it, I get a little more apprehensive sometimes. Especially since, like, a lot of transness has, like, kind of been covered. It can be trendy to be trans for some people. And those trenders are having a negative impact on actual trans people, because it's like, it seems to be belittling what it means to be trans. To have like a meltdown because you want to be called they them as a kid, you're probably, I mean, maybe you are, but I don't know. I like, you also might be trans trending. I don't really know. It's weird to me, but maybe that's just fucking boomer speak. Okay. But mostly misgendering is just about the gender correctness is about creating a comfortable environment for that person to like express themselves who they are.
What's a they?
Yeah, what do you like? Describe to me the feelings of being a they. Describe, can you describe that? What is that experience like? And anytime you ask someone to do that, it immediately descends into incoherence. And also, by the way, the actual gender-neutral pronoun for an individual is it. It's not they. So it's interesting that nobody wants to be an it because it's dehumanizing. Right. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's why they don't want to be called it. They want to be called they instead, because it refers to a person. It refers to a thing. We can change language, right? Like, we understand this. I think it's not that big of a fucking deal. We don't have to shit and come. Somebody wants to have a conversation about changing language. Okay. A disrespectful term. We don't use a lot of disrespectful terms for people anymore because they feel this.
Yo, Jimmy! We get 10 trillion. I'm ready. Yeah, no pressure.
Okay, nothing. I mean,
25! That's right, dude.
this is insane!
It's like, here it is. I love sitting around, having a beer, hanging out, spreading love, spreading positivity, messing with your friends.
So they feel disrespected by it.
You want to be a they, but yeah, if you're calling yourself non-binary, you have to humanize yourself because human beings exist in a sex binary, male and female. If you're rejecting that, you are rejecting.
For the most part, it's like bimodal technically, because like, but sure, yeah, I agree.
Your human identity, and so you've already dehumanized yourself. You are actually it. If it's true that you are not a male or female, then you are it. We don't know what else to call you.
And then
well, that's why it's they instead. It's like person language instead of calling somebody a thing. That's why they changed that a little bit, right? We understand.
Maybe more importantly, one of the things that you're doing when you're doing that is you're giving people, especially if you do it to young people, you're giving them an opportunity to be special and to get special treatment without any special act. They haven't done anything.
I kind of agree with this, for sure. Like, the thing is that, listen, in general, people who are non-binary, there are people that are non-binary with, like, gender dysphoria, but people who, like, don't have gender dysphoria, that are still labeled as trans, like, there is a conversation to have about like trans erasure, because people are starting to think that like, oh, the non-binary kid at school that's let's say they're a biological girl that identifies as they them, they're still dressed like a girl and expressed as a girl in society, but they want to be told they them. Like, what if we start as a society thinking like that's what trans people are? Like that erases actual trans people going through like real struggles. It's like, yeah, there's a whole conversation to have about like non-binary people, absolutely.
Thing that warrants that unique behavior.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I think that's actually so much of this that and people don't notice it, but a lot of this is just standard narcissism.
Yes.
Especially listen to these. Why is this so common?
That's wrong. Saying a lot of this is standard narcissism, I disagree. Kids doing this shit, some of them probably, like, kids are fucking assholes. Like, I talk about this all the time. Every one of us as a kid goes through, like, an identity issue. Now, some of the LGBTQ is very, it's very loud, but not in, like, a negative way, because there are gay kids, there are trans kids. But, like, it's one of those things where, like, you can be LGBTQ without actually being LGBTQ. You could just lie. When I was younger, I was like, oh, I loved metal. I hated new metal. I was like, blah, blah, blah. It's similar to some of the ways that kids act with this shit.
Don't talking around.
Not all of them are necessarily valid just because they're saying so, and that's one of the problems. It's like, you have to take a kid's word for it, and a kid can very easily lie just to be cool. But that's what some people think it's cool.
Celebrities now, all celebrities have trans kids, and they're coming out as non-binary and whatever else. And then you listen to like Demi Lovato, and you listen to them explain why they're.
Their name is Demi Lovato now. Okay.
They them. It's always well. I don't identify with these labels. I'm beyond that.
Bro, I feel like Demi Lovato and shit like that. The reason that they're identifying as trans capacity is because they've been sexualized so much as fucking kids because they were growing up in the industry that like now they've generated some kind of a mental health fucking issue from it. I genuinely believe that. I wouldn't doubt it. I feel like some of this could be potentially like that could be the reason for some of this shit. For some people,
above that, it's like these labels were good enough for billions of humans before you, but it's not good enough for you. You can't find yourself there, but all these other billions of human beings was fine. They had no problem. But you're so special that we need to change the rules of the English language for you specifically. It's incredibly egotistical.
It's again, like not everybody. Some people are weaponizing transness to be unique, sure, but not everybody is doing that. So the conversation isn't, because what he's doing is he's taking the transgenders. Here's what he's doing, right? So we have valid trans people, and then we have transgenders, right? And what he's doing is saying he's targeting the transgenders. He's saying, see, these guys are invalid, and then circling, grouping them in with actual trans people and saying this whole thing is narcissistic, when it's really just the trans people, the people who aren't trans pretending to be trans, that would make it narcissistic, or like young kids just like fucking around, not even understanding what they're saying.
Bizarre. It's like if you feel that you're different than everyone else, you're still a female. You're just a different human being who happens to be a female.
Every trans person that's like a trans male, they know that they're still technically a biological female when you're not saying anything profound here.
So unique. Go prove it with your actions. Prove it with your work. Prove it out there in the world. But to demand this very special attention. And that's what we give people. Like, if you give people that thing today, they'll tell, like, there's groups of people who tell you, you're amazing, you're incredible, you're beautiful, you're brave. It gives them positive affirmation.
Well, yeah, but okay, so actual trans people, like, that are saying that they're trans, or I would say to an extent, like, yeah, sure. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that they're, alright, this is my game, it's not unreasonable to say that they're brave. Like, it could be a big thing to come out as. Like, okay. Again, just giving it to, like, any random person is, like, fucking crazy, but, like, sure.
Making these decisions.
It's also part of what you're describing is personality, right? I mean, so if you're saying, oh, I'm a female, but I don't identify with girly things, and I don't like the color pink, and whatever. Okay, that's your personality. Again, it's fine. There are many ways to be a woman. There are many ways to be a man.
That's true. Like, see, this is one of those weird things. This is a question I've always had: is like, why, like, with the rise of trans, like the mainstream, like transness, I guess you'd say, we see less like butch women. We see like less feminine. Well, we see plenty of feminine guys, but we see like less cross-dressing men, I think, and like less butch women. And now we see more trans men and women, and I wonder why. I wonder if now that there's an availability of transitioning, that it's like a psychological cue to be like, okay, like I can actually be more comfortable with who I am, and maybe part of like butch women to cope when they're actually trans men. I don't know. That's a whole fucking conversation. But okay.
It's like almost infinite ways of doing it, because each man and woman has their own personality, their own perspective of the world, and that's fine. So I think that what I'm expressing is more the kind of traditional idea is much more expansive because it allows you as a man to just, be who you are. You're still,
well, you can still do that though, even under the current definition. Like, nobody's saying that like all cross-dressers need to die or that butch women need to go fucking die. Nobody's saying that. They're just saying that there's the availability of gender identity now.
Well, man, but be who you are. The idea now is that if you're a man,
butch is butch women is that sexist or something? Is that like a wrong thing to say? Like, that's fine, right? Yeah, like fucking what is it called? Like fucking you know what I mean? Like very masculine women. This butch women like fucking is that like a slur or something? No, there's not.
You have interests or ideas that fall outside of the standard norm. Now you lose your manhood. You're actually a woman. So they're actually reinforcing the gender binary.
Tomboys. Thank you. Okay. Tomboys.
The standard norm. Now you lose your manhood. You're actually a woman. So they're actually reinforcing.
No, nobody's forcing you to identify as a woman, as a feminine man. So what you're saying is just not right.
The gender binary while trying to destroy it at the same time, which is interesting.
It's not really.
But I think most of what they're trying to describe is actually just personality. Yeah. And now we have this situation where you could have a person who has 5 different genders and 6 sexual orientations, but no personality because their personality has been subsumed by all of these labels. They've categorized and labeled and everything, and it's really strange.
The art exhibit recently where the girls threw soup on the Van Gogh. You know about that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
They asked, someone was interviewing them. Patrick Bet-David was interviewing them and asked them, can I ask what your pronouns are? And she said she was he, she, they.
He, she, and they.
I go, she's like masculine, you're feminine, and you're plural.
She's all.
She's everything. She's basically like a Hindu god. It's like.
Yeah, I mean, I really just don't get shit like that. It doesn't really make too much sense to me. Like, what does that mean to you? Like, what do your pronouns mean to you if you're identifying as all, like, any of them? It doesn't really make too much sense.
Like, what are you?
This is just laziness. At least choose one.
It's just pompous nonsense. It's just, in that particular case, thinking that you're going to fucking cure climate change by throwing soup on a priceless painting and then gluing yourself to a wall.
And also, what does it tell you that the person interviewing her knew that she definitely has different pronouns?
Yeah.
You just know, like, it comes with the package, which tells you, again, that this is an ideological and political thing. It's not an actual identity.
If you were one of those people that thought that there was a literal attack on the foundations of this country to try to destroy it from the youth up, what better way to do it than with social media reinforcing?
So, designed to protect her.
I'm gonna get like enough of this. Okay, well, that's all we got, guys. So that's what we're gonna obviously stop with for the further.
From dark sources emerged.
Ethnicity inheritance. Nigerian East Central from you. Benin, my dad's side. 30% Japanese. Thank you, Mom. There's just still so much to discover. Now on sale at Ancestry.
Anna and her daughter are missing. Where they are.
No, Ella don't know.
So clearly, yeah, I mean, I think you have to constantly be thinking along those lines, and hopefully you try to avoid it. Yeah, you can only do the best that a human being can do. But yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. I would say that I spend an inordinate amount of time reflecting on whether I'm doing the right thing. And I may not always do the right thing. I'm sure a lot of people think that I'm doing the wrong thing on a daily basis. But it's definitely a question that has to enter your mind as a historically aware and hopefully morally decent person.
Do you think you're mentally strong enough if you realize that you're on the wrong side of history to switch sides? Very few people in history seem to be strong enough to do that.
I mean, I think that the answer I hope would be yes. You never know until the time comes and you have to do it. I will say that having heterodox opinions in a wide variety of areas is something that I have done before. I'm the only person I've ever heard of in public life who actually has a list on their website of all the dumb, stupid things I've ever said. So where I go through and I either say, this is why I still believe this, or this is why what I said was terrible and stupid. And I'm sure that list will get a lot longer.
Yeah, look forward to new additions to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it actually is a super, super long list. People should check it out. And it's quite honest and raw. What do you think about, it's interesting to ask you, given how pro-life you are, about Ye's comments about comparing the Holocaust to the 900,000 abortions in the United States a year.
So, I'll take this from two angles. As a pro-life person, I actually didn't find it offensive, because if you believe, as I do, that unborn and preborn lives deserve protection, then the slaughter of just under 1 million of them every year for the last almost 50 years, is a historic tragedy on par with a Holocaust. From the outside perspective, I get why people would say there's a difference in how people view the preborn as to how people view, say, a 7-year-old who's being killed in the Holocaust. Like the visceral power and evil of the Nazis shoving full-grown human beings and small children into gas chambers can't be compared to a person who, even from a pro-life perspective, may not fully understand the consequences of their own decisions, or from a pro-choice perspective, fully understands the consequences, but just doesn't think that that person is a person. That's actually different. So I understand both sides of it. I wasn't offended by Ye's comments in that way, though, because if you're a pro-life human being, then you do think that what's happening is a great tragedy on scale that involves the dehumanization of an entire class of people, the preborn.
So philosophically, you understand the comparison.
I did. Sure.
So in his comments, in the jumping from the individual to the group, I'd like to ask you, you're one of the most effective people in the world at attacking the left. And sometimes it can slip into attacking the group. Do you worry that that's the same kind of oversimplification that Ye is doing about Jewish people that you can sometimes do with the left as a group?
So when I speak about the left, I'm speaking about a philosophy. I'm not really speaking about individual human beings as the leftists, like, group, and then try to name who the members of this individual group are. I also make a distinction between the left and liberals. There are a lot of people who are liberal who disagree with me on taxes, disagree with me on foreign policy, disagree with me on a lot of things. The people who I'm talking about generally when I talk about the left in the United States are people who believe that alternative points of view ought to be silenced because they are damaging and harmful simply based on the disagreement. So that's one distinction. The second distinction, again, is when I talk about the right versus the left, typically I'm talking about a battle of competing philosophies. And so I'm not speaking about typically, it would be hard to, if you put a person in front of me and said, is this person of the left or of the right? Having just met them, I wouldn't be able to label them in the same way that if you met somebody in the name of Greenstein, you'd immediately got Jew. Or you met a black person. And the adherence to a philosophy makes you a member of a group. If I think the philosophy is bad, that doesn't necessarily mean that you as a person are bad, but it does mean that I think your philosophy is bad.
Yeah, so the grouping is based on the philosophy versus something like a race, like the color of your skin, or race, as in the case of the Jewish people. So it's a different thing. You can be a little bit more nonchalant and careless in attacking a group because it's ultimately attacking a set of ideas.
Well,
right?
I mean, it's really nonchalant in attacking the set of ideas, and I don't know that nonchalant would be the way to put it. I tried to be exact when you don't always hit, but if I say that I oppose the communists, right, and then presumably I'm speaking of people who believe in the communist philosophy. Now, the question is whether I'm mislabeling, right? Whether I'm taking somebody who's not actually a communist and then shoving them in that group of communists, right? That would be inaccurate.
The dangerous thing is it expands the group, as opposed to you talking about the philosophy. You're throwing everybody who's ever said, I'm curious about communism, I'm curious about socialism, because there's like a gradient. It's like to throw something at you. I think Joe Biden said MAGA Republicans, right?
Right.
I think that's a very careless statement, because the thing you jump to immediately is like all
everyone
Republicans
who voted for Trump.
for
right.
Trump.
Right.
Versus, I think, in the charitable interpretation, that means a set of ideas. Right?
Yeah, my actually problem with the MAGA Republicans line from Biden is that he went on in the speech that he made in front of Independence Hall to actually try and define what it meant to be a MAGA Republican who was a threat to the Republic, was the kind of language that he was using. And later on in the speech, he actually suggested, well, there are moderate Republicans, and the moderate Republicans are people who agree with me on, like, the Inflation Reduction Act. It's like, well, that can't be the dividing line between a MAGA Republican and a moderate. Like, a moderate Republican, somebody who agrees with you. You got to name me, like, a Republican who disagrees with you fairly strenuously, but is not in this group of threats to the Republic. You make that distinction, we can have a fair discussion about whether the idea of election denial, for example, makes somebody, a threat to institutions. That's a conversation that we can have, and then we'll have to discuss how much power they have, what the actual perspective is. We'll delve into it. But I think that he was being overbroad and sort of labeling all of his political enemies under one rubric. Now, again, in politics, this stuff sort of happens all the time. I'm not going to plead clean hands here because I'm sure that I've been inexact. But somebody would be good in that particular situation is for somebody to sort of read me back the quote, and I'll let you know where I've been inaccurate. I'll try to do that.
And also, you don't shy away from humor and occasional trolling and mockery and all that kind of stuff for the fun, for the chaos, all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I try not to do trollery for trollery's sake, but, if the show's not entertaining and not fun, people aren't going to listen. And so, if you can't have fun with politics, the truth about politics is we all take it very seriously because it has some serious ramifications. Politics is Veep, it is not House of Cards. The general rule of politics is that everyone is a moron unless proven otherwise, that virtually everything is done out of stupidity rather than malice, and that if you actually watch politics as a comedy, you'll have a lot more fun. And so the difficulty for me is I take politics seriously, but also I have the ability to sort of flip the switch and suddenly it all becomes incredibly funny. Because it really is, like, if you just watch it from a pure entertainment perspective, and you put aside the fact that it affects hundreds of millions of people, then watching, President Trump being president, I mean, he's one of the funniest humans who's ever lived. Watching Kamala Harris be Kamala Harris talking about how much she loves Venn diagrams for electric buses, I mean, that's funny stuff. So if I can't make fun of that, then my job becomes pretty morose pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's funny to figure out what is the perfect balance between seeing the humor and the absurdity of the game of it versus taking it seriously enough because it does affect hundreds of millions of people. It's a weird balance to strike. It's like, I am afraid with the internet that everything becomes a joke.
I totally agree with this. I will say this. I try to make less jokes about the ideas and more jokes about the people in the same way that I make jokes about myself. I'm pretty self-effacing in terms of my humor. I would say at least half the jokes on my show are about me. When I'm reading ads for Tommy John and they're talking about their no wedgie guarantee, I'll say things like, that would help me in high school, because it would have. I mean, just factually speaking. So, if I can speak that way about myself, I feel like everybody else can take it as well.
Difficult question. In 2017, there was a mosque shooting in Quebec City. 6 people died, 5 others seriously injured. The 27-year-old gunman consumed a lot of content online and checked Twitter accounts a lot of a lot of people, but one of the people he checked quite a lot of is you. 93 times in the month leading up to the shooting. If you could talk to that young man, what would you tell him? And maybe other young men listening to this that have hate in their heart in that same way, what would you tell them?
You're getting it wrong. If anything that I or anyone else in mainstream politics says drives you to violence, you're getting it wrong. You're getting it wrong. Now, again, when it comes to stuff like this, I have a hard and fast rule that I've applied evenly across the spectrum, and that is I never blame people's politics for other people committing acts of violence unless they're actively advocating violence. So when a fan of Bernie Sanders shoots up a congressional baseball game, that is not Bernie Sanders' fault. I may not like his rhetoric, I may disagree with him on everything. Bernie Sanders did not tell somebody to go shoot up a congressional baseball game. When a nutcase in San Francisco goes and hits Paul Pelosi with a hammer, I'm not going to blame Kevin McCarthy, the House Speaker, for that. When somebody threatens Brett Kavanaugh, I'm not going to suggest that was Joe Biden's fault, because it's not Joe Biden's fault. I mean, we can play this game all day long, and I find that the people who are most intensely focused on playing this game are people who tend to oppose the politics of the person, as opposed to actually believing sincerely that this has driven somebody into the arms of the god of violence. But, I have 4.7 million Twitter followers. I have 8 million Facebook followers. I have 5 million YouTube followers. I would imagine that some of them are people who are violent. I would imagine that some of them are people who do evil things or want to do evil things. And I wish that there were a wand that we could wave that would prevent those people from deliberately or mistakenly misinterpreting things as a called violence. It's just a negative byproduct of the fact that you can reach a lot of people. And so, if somebody could point me to the comment that I suppose, quote-unquote, drove somebody to go and literally murder human beings, then I would appreciate it so I could talk about the comment, but I don't, mainly because I just think that if we remove agency from individuals, and if we blame broad-scale political rhetoric for every act of violence, we're not going to, the people who are going to pay the price are actually the general population, because free speech will go away. If the idea is that things that we say could drive somebody who is unbalanced to go do something evil, the necessary byproduct is hate, is that speech is a form of hate, hate is a form of violence, speech is a form of violence, speech needs to be curbed. And that to me is deeply disturbing.
So, definitely that man, that 27-year-old man, is the only one responsible for the evil he did. But what if he and others like him are not nutcases? What if they're people with pain, with anger in their heart? What would you say to them? You are exceptionally influential, and other people like you that speak passionately about ideas. What do you think is your opportunity to alleviate the hate in their heart?
If we're speaking about people who are mentally ill and people who are just misguided, I'd say to him the thing that I said to every other young man in the country: you need to find meaning and purpose in forming connections that actually matter, in a belief system that actually promotes general prosperity and promotes helping other people. And this is why, the message that I most commonly say to young men is it's time for you to grow up, mature, get a job, get married, have a family, take care of the people around you, become a useful part of your community. I've never, at any point in my entire career, suggested violence as a resort to political issues. And the whole point of having a political conversation is that it's a conversation. If I didn't think that it were worth trying to convince people of my point of view, I wouldn't do what I do for a living.
So violence doesn't solve it?
No, it doesn't.
As if this wasn't already a difficult conversation. Let me ask about Ilhan Omar. You've called out her criticism of Israel policies as anti-Semitic. Is there a difference between criticizing a race of people, like the Jews, and criticizing the policies of a nation like Israel?
Of course. I criticize the policies of Israel on a fairly regular basis. I would assume from a different angle than Ilhan Omar does. But yeah, I criticize the policies of a wide variety of states. And to take an example, I've criticized Israel's policy in giving control of the Temple Mount to the Islamic Waqf, which effectively prevents anybody except for Muslims from praying up there. I've also criticized the Israeli government for their COVID crackdown. Right? They can criticize the policies of any government, but that's not what Ilhan Omar does. Ilhan Omar doesn't actually believe that there should be a state of Israel. She believes that Zionism is racism and that the existence of a Jewish state in Israel is, in and of itself, the great sin. That is a statement she would make about no other people in no other land. She would not say that the French don't deserve a state for the French. She wouldn't say that Somalis wouldn't deserve a state in Somalia. She wouldn't say that Germans don't deserve a state in Germany. She wouldn't say for the 50-plus Islamic states that exist across the world that they don't deserve states of their own. It is only the Jewish state that has fallen under significant scrutiny. And she also promulgates lies about one specific state in the form of suggesting, for example, that Israel is an apartheid state, which it's most eminently not, considering the last unity government in Israel included an Arab party, that there are Arabs who said on the Israeli Supreme Court, and all the rest. And then beyond that, obviously, she's engaged in some of the same sort of anti-Semitic tropes that you heard from Ye, right? The stuff about, it's all about the Benjamins, that American support for Israel is all about the Benjamins. And she's had to be chided by members of her own party about this sort of stuff before.
Can you empathize with the plight of Palestinian people?
Absolutely. Some of the uglier things that I've ever said in my career are things that I said very early on when I was 17, 18. I started writing syndicated comment when I was 17. I'm now 38. So virtually all the dumb things, not say virtually all, many of the dumb things, the plurality of the dumb things that I've said came from the ages of, I would say, 17 to maybe 23. And they are rooted, again, in sloppy thinking. I feel terrible for people who have lived under the thumb and currently live under the thumb of Hamas, which is an actual terrorist group, or the Palestinian Authority, which is a corrupt oligarchy that steals money from its people and leaves them in misery, or Islamic Jihad, which is an actual terrorist group. The basic rule for the region, in my view, is if these groups were willing to make peace with Israel, they would have a state literally tomorrow. And if they are not, then there will be no peace. And it really is that simple. If Israel, the formula it's typically used has become a bit of a bumper sticker, but it happens to be factually correct. If the Palestinians put down their guns tomorrow, there would be a state. If the Israelis put down their guns, there would be no Israel.
You get attacked a lot on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta ask you about your own psychology. How do you not let that break you mentally? And how do you avoid letting that lead to a resentment of the groups that attack you?
There are a few sort of practical things that I've done. So, for example, I would say that 4 years ago, Twitter was all-consuming. Twitter is an ego machine, especially the notifications button, right? The notifications button is just people talking about you all the time. And the normal human tendency is, wow, people talking about me, got to see what they're saying about me, which is a recipe for insanity. So my wife actually said, Twitter is making your life miserable, you need to take it off your phone. So Twitter is not on my phone. if I want to log onto Twitter, I have to go onto my computer and I have to make the conscious decision to go onto Twitter and then take a look at what's going on.
I could just imagine you like there's a computer in the basement, you descend into the check Twitter.
That's pretty much
in the darkness.
If you look at when I actually tweet, it's generally like in the run-up to recording my show or when I'm prepping for my show later in the afternoon, for example.
That doesn't affect you negatively mentally, like put you in a bad mental space?
Not particularly if it's restricted to sort of what's being watched. Now, I will say that I think the most important thing is you have to surround yourself with a group of people who you trust enough to make serious critiques of you when you're doing something wrong, but also you know that they have your best interests at heart. Because the internet is filled with people who don't have your best interests at heart and who hate your guts, and so you can't really take those critiques seriously or it does wreck you. And the world is also filled with sycophants, right? Then the more successful you become, there are a lot of people who will tell you you're always doing the right thing. I'm very lucky. I got married when I was 24, my wife was 20, so she's known me long before I was famous or wealthy or anything. And so she's a good sounding board. I have a family that's willing to call me out on my bullshit, as you talked to Ye about. I have friends who are able to do that. I try to have open lines of communications with people who I believe have my best interests at heart, but one of the sort of conditions of being friends is that when you see me do something wrong, I'd like for you to let me know that so I can correct it. I don't want to leave bad impressions out there.
The sad thing about the internet, just looking at the critiques you get, I see very few critiques from people that actually want you to succeed, want you to grow. I mean, they're very, they're not sophisticated. They're cruel. The critiques are just, it's not actual critiques. It's just cruelty.
And then that's most of Twitter. I mean, as I said, Twitter is a place to smack and be smacked. I mean, anybody who uses Twitter for an intellectual conversation, I think, is engaging in category error.
I use it to spread love. I think it's
You're the only one. It's you and no one else, my friend.
All right. Well, on that topic, what do you think about Elon buying Twitter? What do you like? What are you hopeful on that front? What would you like to see Twitter improve?
So, I'm very hopeful about Elon buying Twitter. I mean, I think that Elon is significantly more transparent than what has taken place up till now. He seems committed to the idea that he's going to broaden the Overton window to allow for conversations that simply were banned before, everything ranging from efficacy of masks with regard to COVID to whether men can become women and all the rest. A lot of things that would get you banned on Twitter before without any sort of real explanation. It seems like he's dedicated to at least explaining what the standards are going to be and being broader in allowing a variety of perspectives on the outlet, which I think is wonderful. I think that's also why people are freaking out. I think the kind of wailing and gnashing of teeth and wearing of sackcloth and ash by so many members of the legacy media, I think a lot of that is because Twitter essentially was an oligarchy in which certain perspectives were allowed and certain perspectives just were not. And that was part of the broader social media reimposed oligarchy in the aftermath of 2017. So in order to really understand, I think, what it means for Elon to take over Twitter, I think that we have to take a look at sort of the history of media in the United States in 2 minutes or less. The United States, the media, for most of its existence up until about 1990, at least from about 1930s until the 1990s, virtually all media was 3 major television networks, a couple major newspapers, and the wire services. Everybody had a local newspaper with 2 wire services that basically did all the foreign policy and all the national policy. McClatchy, Reuters, AP, AFP, etc. So that monopoly or oligopoly existed until the rise of the internet. There were sort of pokes at it in talk radio and Fox News, but there certainly was not this plethora of sources. Then the internet explodes, and all of a sudden you can get news everywhere. And the way that people are accessing that news is, you're, I believe, significantly younger than I am, but we used to do this thing called bookmarking, where you would bookmark a series of websites, and then you would visit them every morning. And then social media came up. And
just on AOL, or?
Yeah, exactly. You had the dial-up, and you'd actually, there was actually a can connected to a string, and you would actually just go, and then there came a point where social media arose, and social media was sort of a boon for everybody, because you no longer had to bookmark anything, you just followed your favorite accounts, and all of them would pop up, and you followed everything on Facebook, and it would all pop up, and it was all centralized. And for a while, everybody was super happy, because this was the brand new wave of the future. It made everything super easy. Suddenly, outlets like mine were able to see new eyeballs, because it was all centralized in one place, right? You didn't have to do it through Google optimization. You could now just put it on Facebook, and so many eyeballs were on Facebook, you get more traffic. And everybody seemed pretty happy with this arrangement until precisely the moment Donald Trump became president. At that point, then the sort of pre-existing supposition of a lot of the powers that be, which was Democrats are going to continue winning from here on out, so we can sort of use these social media platforms as ways to push our information and still allow for there to be other information out there. The immediate response was, we need to reestablish this siphoning of information, misinformation and disinformation that won Donald Trump the election. We need to pressure the social media companies to start cracking down on misinformation and disinformation. And actually see this in the historical record. I mean, you can see how Jack Dorsey's talk about free speech shifted from about 2015 to about 2018. You can see Mark Zuckerberg gave a speech at Georgetown in 2018 in which he talked about free speech and its value. And by 2019, he was going in front of Congress talking about how he was responsible for the stuff that was on Facebook, which is not true. He's not responsible for the stuff on Facebook, right? It's a platform. Is AT&T responsible for the stuff you say on your phone? The answer is typically no. So when that happened, all of these, because all the eyeballs had now been centralized in these social media sites, they were able to suddenly control what you could see and what you could not see. And the most obvious example was obviously leading up to 2020, the election, the killing of the Hunter Biden story is a great example of this. And so Elon coming in and taking over one of the social media services and saying, I'm not playing by your rule, right? There's not going to be this sort of group of people in the halls of power who are going to decide what we can see and hear. Instead, I'm going to let 1,000 flowers bloom. There will be limits, but it's going to be on a more case-by-case basis. We're going to allow perspectives that are mainstream, but maybe not mainstream in the halls of academia or in the halls of media. Let those be said. I think it's a really good thing. Now, that comes with, some responsibilities on Elon's personal part, which would be, to be, for example, I think more responsible in dissemination of information himself sometimes, right? Like he got himself in trouble the other day for tweeting out that story about Paul Pelosi that was speculative and untrue. And I don't think what he did is, horrific. He deleted it when he found out that was false. But and that's actually free speech working, right? He said something wrong. People ripped into him. He realized he was wrong and he deleted it, which seems to me a better solution than preemptively banning content, which only raises more questions than it actually stops. With that said, as the face of responsible free speech, and that's sort of what he's pitching at Twitter. He, I think, should enact that himself and be a little more careful in the stuff that he tweets out.
That's a tricky balance. The reason a lot of people are freaking out is because, one, he's putting his thumb on the scale by saying he is more likely to vote Republican. He's showing himself to be center-right, and sort of just having a political opinion versus being this amorphous thing that doesn't have a political opinion. I think if I were to guess, I haven't talked to him about it, but if I were to guess, he's sending a kind of signal that's important for the Twitter, the company itself, because if we're being honest, most of the employees are left-leaning. So you have to kind of send a signal that, like a resisting mechanism, to say, like, since most of the employees are left, it's good for Elon to be more right, to balance out the way the actual engineering is done, to say we're not going to do any kind of activism inside the engineering. If I were to guess, that's kind of the effective aspect of that mechanism. And the other one, by posting the Pelosi thing, is probably to expand the Overton window. It's saying we can play. We could post stuff, we could post conspiracy theories, and then through discourse figure out what is and isn't true.
Yeah, again, like I say, I think that that is a better mechanism in action than what it was before. I just think it gave people who hate his guts the opening to kind of slap him for no reason. But I can see the strategy of it for sure. And I think that the general idea that he's kind of pushing right where the company had pushed left before, I think that there is actually unilateral polarization right now in politics, at least with regard to social media, in which one side basically says the solution to disinformation is to shut down free speech from the other side. And the other side is basically like me are saying the solution to disinformation is to let 1,000. Like, I'd rather have people on the left also being able to put out stuff that I disagree with than for there to be anybody who's sort of in charge of these social media platforms and using them as editorial sites. I mean, they're plenty. I'm not criticizing MSNBC for not putting out right-wing opinion, and that's fine. I run a conservative site. We're not going to put up left-wing opinions on a wide variety of issues because we are a conservative site. But if you pitch yourself as a platform, that's a different thing. If you pitch yourself as the town square, as Elon likes to call it, then I think Elon has a better idea of that than many of the former employees did, especially now that we have that report from The Intercept suggesting that there are people from Twitter working with DHS to monitor quote-unquote disinformation, being rather vague about what disinformation meant.
Yeah, I don't think activism has a place in what is fundamentally an engineering company that's building a platform. like the people inside the company should not be putting a thumb on the scale of what is and isn't allowed. You should create a mechanism for the people to decide what is and isn't allowed. Do you think Trump should have been removed from Twitter? Should his account be restored?
His account should be restored. And this is coming from somebody who really dislikes an enormous number of Donald Trump's tweets. Again, he's a very important political personage. Even if he weren't, I don't think that he should be banned from Twitter or Facebook in coordinated fashion. And by the way, I hold that opinion about people who I think are far worse than Donald Trump. Right? Everyone knows I'm not an Alex Jones guy. I don't like Alex Jones. I think Alex Jones pervades.
Think Alex should be back on Twitter?
I do, actually, because I think that there are plenty of people who are willing to say that what he's saying is wrong. And I'm not a big fan of this idea that because people I disagree with, and people who personally targeted, by the way, I mean, Alex Jones has said some things about me personally that I'm not real fond of. But
you guys not?
Well, we're not besties. No, it turns out, yeah. All I've said is I don't really enjoy the show. He said some other stuff about the Antichrist and such, but that's a bit of a different thing, I suppose. Even so, I'm just not a big fan of this idea. Like, I've defended people who have really gone after me on a personal level, have targeted me, that the town square is all over. Banning people from the town square is unpersoning them. Unless you violated a criminal statute, you should not be unpersoned in American society, as a general rule. That doesn't mean that companies that are not platforms don't have the ability to respond to you. I think Adidas is right to terminate his contract with Kanye, for example, with Ye. But Twitter ain't Adidas.
So the way your stance on free speech, to the degree it's possible to achieve on a platform like Twitter, is you fight bad speech with more speech, with better speech. And that's so if Alex Jones and Trump is allowed back on in the coming months and years leading up to the 2024 election, you think that's going to make for a better world in the long term?
I think that on the principle that people should be allowed to do this, and the alternative being a group of thought bosses telling us what we can and cannot see, yes. So I think in the short term it's going to mean a lot of things that I don't like very much. Sure, I mean them's the cost of doing business. Like I think that one of the costs of freedom is people doing things that I don't particularly like, and I would prefer the freedom with all the stuff I don't like than not the freedom.
Let me linger on the love a little bit. You and a lot of people are pretty snarky on Twitter, sometimes to the point of mockery, derision, even a bit of, if I were to say, bad faith in the kind of mockery. And you see it as a war. Like, I disagree with both you and Elon on this. Elon sees Twitter as a war zone, or at least saw it that way in the past. Have you ever considered being nicer on Twitter? Like, as a voice that a lot of people look up to? That if Ben Shapiro becomes a little bit more about love, that's going to inspire a lot of people? Or no? Is it just too fun for you?
The answer is yes. Sure, it's occurred to me. Let's put it this way. There are a lot of tweets that actually don't go out that I delete. I will say that Twitter's new function, that 30-second function, is a friend of mine. Every so often I'll tweet something and I'll think about it a second. I'm like, do I need to do that?
Can you make a book published after you pass away of all the tweets that you didn't send?
Oh no, the kids are still going to be around, I hope. So this is the legacy. But yeah, I mean, sure. The answer is yes, and there's a good piece of what we would call in Orthodox Judaism musar. This is like he's giving a musar shmooze right now. This is the kind of be a better person stuff. I agree with you. And yeah, I will say that Twitter is sometimes too much fun. I try to be at least, if not even-handed, then equal opportunity in my derision. And I remember that during the 2016 primaries, I used to post rather snarky tweets about virtually all of the candidates, Republican and Democrat. And every so often I'll still do some of that. I do think actually the amount of snark on my Twitter feed has gone down fairly significantly. I think if you go back a couple of years, it's probably a little more snarky. Today I'm trying to use it a little bit more in terms of strategy to get out information. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to make jokes about, for example, Joe Biden. I will make jokes about Joe Biden. He's the president of the United States. Nobody else will mock him. So the entire comedic establishment has decided they actually work for him.
So if the president of the United States, no matter who they are, get the snark.
Yes, and President Trump, I think, is fairly aware that he got the snark from me as well. Like this, when it comes to snarking the president, I'm not going to stop that. I think the president deserves to be snarked.
So you're not afraid of attacking Trump?
No, I mean, I've done it before.
Can you say what your favorite and least favorite things are about President Trump and President Biden, one at a time? So maybe one thing that you can say is super positive about Trump and one thing super negative about Trump.
Okay, so the super positive thing about Trump is that because he has no preconceived views that are establishmentarian, he's sometimes willing to go out of the box and do things that haven't been tried before. And sometimes that works. I mean, the best example being the entire foreign policy establishment telling him that he couldn't get a Middle Eastern deal done unless he centered the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and instead he just went right around that and ended up cutting a bunch of peace deals in the Middle East, or moving the embassy in Jerusalem, right? Sometimes he does stuff, and it's really out of the box, and it actually works, and that's kind of awesome in politics, and neat to see. The downside of Trump is that he has no capacity to use any sort of... there's no filter in his brain and mouth. Well, whatever happens in his brain is the thing that comes out of his mouth. I know a lot of people find that charming and wonderful, and it is very funny, but I don't think that it is a particularly excellent personal quality in a person who has as much responsibility as President Trump has. I think he says a lot of damaging and bad things on Twitter. I think that he seems consumed in some ways by his own grievances, which is why you've seen him focusing on election 2020 so much. And I think that is very negative about President Trump. So I'm very grateful to President Trump as a conservative for many of the things that he did. I think that a lot of his personality issues are pretty severe.
What about Joe Biden?
So I think that the thing that I like most about Joe Biden, I will say that Biden, two things. One, Biden seems to be a very good father. By all available evidence, right? There are a lot of people who will put out, kind of tape of him talking to Hunter, and Hunter's having trouble with drugs or whatever. And I keep just listening to that tape and thinking, he seems like a really good dad. Like the stuff that he's saying to his son is stuff that, God forbid, if that were happening with my kid, I would be saying to my kid. And so, you can't help but feel for the guy. He's had an incredibly difficult go of it with his first wife and members of his family, and then Bo dying. I mean, like that kind of stuff obviously is deeply sympathetic, and his he seems like a deeply sympathetic father. As far as his politics, he seems like a slap on the back, kind of guy, and I don't mind that. I think that's nice. So far as it goes, it's sort of an old school politics where things are done with handshake and personal relationships. The thing that I don't like about him is I think sometimes that's really not genuine. I think that sometimes, I think that's his personal tendency, but I think sometimes he allows the prevailing winds of his party to carry him to incredibly radical places, and then he just doubles down on the radicalism in some pretty disingenuous ways. And there I would cite the Independence Day speech, or the Independence Hall speech, which I thought was truly one of the worst speeches I've seen a president give.
So you don't think he's trying to be unified?
Not at all. I mean, that's what he was elected to do. He was elected to do two things: not be alive and be two things. And when I say not be alive, I don't mean like physically dead. That's where the snark comes in. But what I do mean is that he was elected to not be particularly activist. Basically, the mandate was don't be Trump, be sane, don't be Trump, calm everything down. And instead he got in and he's like, what if we spend $7 trillion? What if we pull out of Afghanistan without any sort of plan? What if I start labeling all of my political enemies of the Republic? What if I start bringing Dylan Mulvaney to the White House and talking about how it is a moral sin to prevent the genital mutilation of minors? And like this kind of stuff is very radical stuff. And this is not a president who is pursuing a unifying agenda, which is why his approval rating sank from 60% when he entered office to low 40s or high 30s today. Unlike President Trump, who never had a high approval rating, right? Trump came into office and he had like a 45% approval rating, and when he left office, he had about a 43% approval rating. It bounced around between 45 and 37 pretty much his entire presidency. Biden went from being a very popular guy coming in to a very unpopular guy right now, and if you're Joe Biden, you should be looking in the mirror and wondering exactly why.
Do you think that pulling out from Afghanistan could be flipped as a pro for Biden in terms that he actually did it?
I think it's going to be almost impossible. I think the American people are incredibly inconsistent about their own views on foreign policy. In other words, we like to be isolationist until it comes time for us to be defeated and humiliated. When that happens, we tend not to like it very much.
You mentioned Biden being a good father. Can you make the case for and against the Hunter Biden laptop story, for it being a big deal and against it being a big deal?
Sure. So the case for it being a big deal is basically twofold. One is that it is clearly relevant if the president's son is running around to foreign countries picking up bags of cash because his last name is Biden while his father is vice president of the United States. And it raises questions as to influence peddling for either the vice president or the former vice president using political connections. Did he make any money? Who was the big guy, right? All these open questions. That obviously implicates, the questions to be asked. And then the secondary reason that the story is big is actually because of the reaction of the story. The banning of the story is in and of itself a major story. If there's any story that implicates a presidential candidate in the last month of an election and there is a media blackout, including a social media blackout, that obviously raises some very serious questions about informational flow and dissemination in the United States.
So no matter how big of a deal the story is, it is a big deal that there's a censorship of any relevant story.
When there's a coordinated, collusive blackout, yeah, that's a serious and major problem. So those are the two reasons why it would be a big story. The two reasons, a reason why it would not be a big story, perhaps, is if it turns out, and we don't really know this yet, but let's say that Hunter Biden was basically off on his own, doing what he was doing, being a derelict or drug addict or acting badly, and his dad had nothing to do with it, and Joe was telling the truth. But the problem is we never actually got those questions answered. So if it turned out to be nothing of a story, the nice thing about stories that turn out to be nothing is that after they turn out to be nothing, they're nothing. The biggest problem with this story is that it wasn't allowed to take the normal life cycle of a story, which is original story breaks, follow-on questions are asked, follow-on questions are answered. The story is either now a big story or into nothing. When the life cycle of the story is cut off right at the very beginning, right when it's born, then that allows you to speculate in any direction you want. You can speculate it means nothing. It's nonsense. It's a Russian laptop. It's disinformation. Or on the other hand, this means that Joe Biden was personally calling Hunter and telling him to pick up a stack of cash over in Beijing. And then he became president, he's influence peddling. So, this is why it's important to allow these stories to go forward. So this is why actually the bigger story at the moment is not the laptop, it's the reaction to the laptop, because it cut off that life cycle of the story. And then, at some point I would assume that there will be some follow-on questions that are actually answered. The House is pledging, if it goes Republican, to investigate all of this. Again, I wouldn't be extremely surprised if it turns out that there was no direct involvement of Joe in this sort of stuff, because it turns out, as I said before, that all of politics is beef. And this is always the story with half the scandals that you see, is that everybody assumes that there's some sort of deep and abiding, clever plan, and some politician is implementing it, and then you look at it and it turns out, no, it's just something dumb, right? This is sort of perfect example of this, President Trump with the classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. So people on the left, it's probably nuclear codes. Probably he's taking secret documents and selling them to the Russians and the Chinese. And the real most obvious explanation is Trump looked at the papers and he said, I like these papers, and then he just decided to keep them, right? And then people came to him and said, Mr. President, you're not allowed to keep those papers. He said, who are those people? I don't care about what they have to say. I'm putting them in the other room, in a box. Which is what, it is highly likely that is what happened. And it's very disappointing to people, I think, when they realize that the human brain, you know this better than I do, but the human brain is built to find patterns, right? It's what we like to do. We like to find plans and patterns, because this is how we survived in the wild, because you found a plan, you found a pattern, you cracked the code of the universe. When it comes to politics, the conspiracy theories that we see so often, it's largely because we're seeing inexplicable events. Unless you just assume everyone's a moron. If you assume that there's a lot of stupidity going on, everything becomes quickly explicable. If you assume that there must be some rationale behind it, you have to come up with increasingly convoluted conspiracy theories to explain just why people are acting the way that they're acting. And I find that, I won't say 100% of the time, but 94% of the time, the conspiracy theory turns out just to be people being dumb, and then other people reacting in dumb ways to the original people being dumb.
But it's also, to me, in that same way, very possible, very likely that the Hunter Biden getting money in Ukraine, I guess, for consulting and all that kind of stuff, is a nothing burger. He's qualified, he's getting money as he should. There's a lot of influence peddling in general that's not corrupt.
I think the most obvious explanation there probably is that he was fake influence peddling, meaning he went to Ukraine and he's like, guess what, my dad's Joe. And they're like, well, you don't have any qualifications in oil and natural gas, and you don't really have a great resume, but your dad is Joe. And then that was kind of the end of it. They gave him a bag of cash, hoping he would do something. He never did anything.
I think you're making it sound worse than it is. I think that in general, consulting is done in that way. Your name, it's not like you're...
I agree with you.
You're not... It's not like he is some rare case and this is an illustration of corruption, if you can criticize consulting, which I would,
that's fair.
Which they're basically not providing. You look at a resume and who's who. Like if you went to Harvard, I can criticize the same thing. If you have Harvard on your resume, you're more likely to be hired as a consultant. Maybe there's a network there of people that you know, and you hire them in that same way. If your last name is Biden, there's a lot of last names that sound pretty good at it, right?
For sure.
And so it's not
Hunter
like
Biden admitted that much, by the way, right? In an open interview, he was like, "If your last name weren't Biden, when you got that job," and he's like, "Probably not." And you're
that's
right.
an honest.
I agree with you.
It's not like he's getting a ridiculous amount of money. He was getting like a pretty standard consulting kind of money, which also would criticize because they get a ridiculous amount of money. But I sort of even to push back on the life cycle or to steelman the side that was concerned about the Hunter Biden laptop story. I don't know if there is a natural life cycle of the story because there's something about the virality of the internet that we can't predict, that a story can just take hold, and the conspiracy around it builds, especially around politics, where the interpretation, some popular, sexy interpretation of a story that might not be connected to reality at all, will become viral. And that, from Facebook's perspective, is probably what they're worried about, is a organized misinformation campaign that makes up a sexy story or a sexy interpretation of the vague story that we have. And that has an influence on the populace.
I mean, I think that's true, but I think the question becomes who's the great adjudicator there, right? Who adjudicates when the story ought to be allowed to go through even a bad life cycle or allowed to go viral, as opposed to not. Now, it's one thing if you want to say, okay, we can spot the Russian accounts that are actually promoting this stuff. They belong to the Russian government. Got to shut that down. I think everybody agrees. This is actually one of the slides that's happened linguistically that I really object to, is the slide between disinformation and misinformation. And you notice there's this evolution. In 2017, there's a lot of talk about disinformation. It was Russian disinformation. The Russians were putting out deliberately false information in order to skew election results, was the accusation. And then people started using disinformation or misinformation. And misinformation is either mistaken information or information that is quote-unquote out of context. That becomes very subjective very quickly as to what out of context means. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from a foreign source. It can be from a domestic source, right? It could be somebody misinterpreting something here. It could be somebody interpreting something correctly, but PolitiFact thinks that it's out of context. And that sort of stuff gets very murky very quickly. And so I'm deeply uncomfortable with the idea that Facebook, Zuckerberg, was on with Rogan and talking about how the FBI had basically said, look out for Russian interference in the election. And then all of these people were out there saying that the laptop was Russian disinformation, so he basically shut it down. That sort of stuff is frightening, especially because it wasn't Russian disinformation. The laptop was real. And so the fact that you have people who seem to, let's put it this way, it seems as though, maybe this is wrong, it seems as though when a story gets killed preemptively like this, it is almost universally a story that negatively affects one side of the political aisle. I can't remember the last time there was a story on the right that was disinformation or misinformation, where social media stepped in and they went, we cannot have this. This cannot be distributed. We're going to all collude that this information is not distributed. Maybe in response to the story being proved false, it gets taken down. But what made the Hunter Biden thing so amazing is that it wasn't really even in response to anything. It was like the story got posted. There were no actual doubts expressed as to the verified falsity of the story. It was just supposition that it had to be false, and everybody jumped in. So I think that confirmed a lot of the conspiracy theories people had about social media and how it works.
Yeah, so if the reason you want to slow down the viral spread of a thing is at all grounded in partisanship, that's a problem. Like, you should be very honest with yourself and ask yourself that question. Is it because I'm on the left or on the right that I want to slow this down? Versus, is it hate? Bipartisan hate speech. Right? So it's really tricky. But I like you, I'm very uncomfortable in general with any kind of slowing down, with any kind of censorship. But if there's something like a conspiracy theory that spreads hate, that becomes viral, I still lean to let that conspiracy theory spread, because the alternative is dangerous, and more dangerous.
It's sort of like the ring of power, right? Like, everybody wants the ring, because with the ring you can stop the bad guys from going forward, but it turns out that the ring gives you enormous power, and that power can be used in the wrong ways too.
You had the Daily Wire, which I'm a member of.
I appreciate that, thank you.
I recommend everybody sign up to it. It should be part of your regular diet, whether you're on the left, the far left, or the far right. Everybody should be part of your regular diet. Okay, that said, do you worry about the audience capture aspect of it? Because it is a platform for conservatives, and you have a powerful voice on there. It might be difficult for you to go against the talking points or against the stream of ideas that is usually connected to conservative thought. Do you worry about that?
Well, I mean, the audience would obviously be upset with me and would have a right to be upset with me if I suddenly flipped all of my positions on a dime. I have enough faith in my audience that I can say things that I think are true and that may disagree with the audience, on a fairly regular basis, I would say. But they understand that on the deeper principle, we're on the same side of the aisle. At least I hope that much from the audience. It's also why we provide a number of different views on the platforms, many of which I disagree with, but are sort of within the generalized range of conservative thought. It's something I do have to think about every day, though. Yeah, I mean, you have to think about, like, am I saying this because I'm afraid of taking off my audience, or am I saying this because I actually believe this? And that's a delicate dance a little bit. You have to be sort of honest with yourself.
Yeah, somebody like Sam Harris is pretty good at this, at fighting, at saying the most outrageous thing that he knows. He almost leans into it. He knows will piss off a lot of his audience. Sometimes you almost have to test the system. It's like if you feel that you almost exaggerate your feelings just to make sure to send a signal to the audience that you're not captured by them. So speaking of people you disagree with, what is your favorite thing about Candace Owens, and what is one thing you disagree with her on?
Well, my favorite thing about Candace is that she will say things that nobody else will say. My least favorite thing about Candace is that she will say things that nobody else will say. I mean, listen, she says things that are audacious and I think need to be said sometimes. Sometimes I think that she is morally wrong. Right? I think the way she responded to Kanye, I've said this clearly, was dead wrong and morally wrong.
What was her response?
Her original response was that she proffered confusion of what Ye was actually talking about. And then she, was defending her friend. I wish that the way that she had responded was by saying, he's my friend, and also he said something bad and anti-Semitic. I wish that she had said that. Right, so
Right away.
Yeah.
I think you could also, this is the interesting human thing, you could be friends with people that you disagree with, you could be friends with people that actually say hateful stuff, and one of the ways to help alleviate hate is being friends with people that say hateful things.
Yeah, and then calling them out on a personal level when they do say wrong or hateful things.
Yeah, from a place of love and respect, and privately.
Privately is also a big thing, right? I mean, like the public demand for denunciation from friends to friends is difficult, and I certainly have compassion for Candace given the fact that she's so close with Ye.
Yeah, it breaks my heart sometimes, the public fights between friends and broken friendships. I've seen quite a few friendships publicly break over COVID. COVID made people behave their worst in many cases, which, breaks my heart a little bit. Because, like, the human connection is a prerequisite for effective debate and discussion and battles over ideas. Has there been any argument from the opposite political aisle that has made you change your mind about something? If you look back.
So, I will say that I'm thinking it through, because I think that my views probably on foreign policy have morphed somewhat. I would say that I was much more interventionist when I was younger. I'm significantly less interventionist now. I'd probably
give an example.
Sure, I was a big backer of the Iraq War. I think now, in retrospect, I might not be a backer of the Iraq War if the same situation arose again.
How the fuck do I
based on the amount of evidence that had been presented, or based on the sort of willingness of the American public to go it. Right? If you're going to get involved in a war, you have to know what the endpoint looks like, and you have to know what the American people really are willing to bear, and the American people are not willing to bear open-ended occupations. And so, knowing that, you have to consider that going in. So, on foreign policy, I've become a lot more of a, it's almost Henry Kissinger realist in some ways. And when it comes to social policy, I would say that I'm fairly strong where I was. I may have become slightly convinced, actually, by more of the conservative side of the aisle on things like drug legalization. I think when I was younger, I was much more pro-drug legalization than I am now, at least on the local level. On a federal level, I think the federal government can't really do much other than close the borders with regard to fentanyl trafficking, for example. But when it comes to how drugs ruin local communities, you can see how drugs ruin local communities pretty easily.
Which is weird because I saw you smoke a joint right before this conversation.
It's my biggest thing. I mean, I try to keep that secret.
Right. Well, that's interesting about intervention. Can you comment about the war in Ukraine? Because for me, it's a deeply personal thing. But I think you're able to look at it from a geopolitics perspective. What is the role of the United States in this conflict, before the conflict, during the conflict, and right now in helping achieve peace?
I think before the conflict, the big problem is that the West took almost the worst possible view, which was encourage Ukraine to keep trying to join NATO and the EU, but don't let them in. And so what that does is it achieves the purpose of getting Russia really, really, really ticked off and feeling threatened, but also does not give any of the protections of NATO or the EU to Ukraine. I mean, Zelensky is on film when he was a comedy actor making that exact joke, right? Like, he has Merkel on the other line, and she's like, "Oh, welcome to NATO," and he's like, "Great." She's like, "Wait, is this Ukraine on the line?" And oops. But so, that sort of policy is sort of nonsensical. If you're going to offer alliance to somebody, offer alliance to them. And if you're going to guarantee their security, guarantee their security. And the West failed signally to do that. So that was mistakes in the run-up to the war. Once the war began, then the responsibility of the West became to give Ukraine as much material as is necessary to repel the invasion. And the West did really well with that. I think we were late on the ball in the United States. It seemed like Europe led the way a little bit more than the United States did there. But in terms of effectuating American interests in the region, which being an American is what I'm chiefly concerned about, the American interests were severalfold. One is preserve borders. Two is degrade the Russian aggressive military, because Russia's military has been aggressive, and they are a geopolitical rival of the United States. Three, recalibrate the European balance with China. Europe was sort of balancing with Russia and China, and then because of the war, they sort of rebalanced away from China and Russia, which is a real geostrategic opportunity for the United States. It seemed like most of those goals have already been achieved at this point for the United States. And so then the question becomes, what's the off-ramp here, and what is the thing you're trying to prevent? So what's the best opportunity? What's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? And then what's realistic? So best case scenario is Ukraine forces Russia entirely out of Ukraine, including Luhansk, Donetsk, and Crimea. Right? That's the best case scenario. Virtually no one thinks that's accomplishable, including the United States. Right? The White House has basically said as much. It's difficult to imagine, particularly Crimea, the Russians being forced out of Crimea. The Ukrainians have been successful in pushing the Russians out of certain parts of Luhansk and Donetsk. But the idea they're going to be able to push the entire Russian army completely back to the Russian borders, that would be, at best, a very, very long slog. In the middle of a collapsing Ukrainian economy, which is a point that Zelensky has made. It's like, it's not enough for you guys to give us military aid. We're in the middle of a war. We're going to need economic aid as well. So it's a pretty open-ended and strong commitment.
Can take a small tangent on that. Sure. Best case scenario. If that does militarily happen, including Crimea, do you think there's a world in which Vladimir Putin would be able to convince the Russian people that this was a good conclusion to the war?
Right. So the problem is that the best case scenario might also be the worst case scenario, meaning that there are a couple of scenarios that are sort of the worst case scenario, and this is sort of the puzzlement of the situation. One is that Putin feels so boxed in, so unable to go back to his own people and say, we just wasted tens of thousands of lives here for no reason, that he unleashes a tactical nuclear weapon on the battlefield. Nobody knows what happens after that. So we put NATO planes in the air to take out Russian assets. Do Russians start shooting down planes? Does Russia then threaten to escalate even further by attacking an actual NATO civilian center, or even a Ukrainian civilian center with nuclear weapons? And where it goes from there, nobody knows, because nuclear weapons haven't been used since 1945. So that is a worst case scenario. It's an unpredictable scenario that could devolve into really, really significant problems. The other worst case scenario could be a best case scenario, could be a worst, we just don't know, is Putin falls. What happens after that? Who takes over for Putin? Is that person more moderate than Putin? Is that person a liberalizer? It probably won't be Navalny. If he's going to be ousted, it'll probably be somebody who's a top member of Putin's brass right now and has capacity to control the military. Or it's possible the entire regime breaks down, and what you end up with is Syria and Russia, right? Where you just have an entirely out-of-control region with no centralizing power, which is also a disaster area. And so in the nature of risk mitigation, in sort of an attempt at risk mitigation, what actually should be happening right now is some off-ramp has to be offered to Putin. The off-ramp likely is going to be him maintaining Crimea and parts of Luhansk and Donetsk, probably going to be a commitment by Ukraine not to join NATO formally, but a guarantee by the West to defend Ukraine in case of an invasion of its borders again by Russia, like an actual treaty obligation, not like the BS treaty obligation and when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in the 90s. And that is likely how this is going to have to go. The problem is that requires political courage, not from Zelensky. It requires courage from probably Biden, because Zelensky's not in a political position where he can go back to his own people who have made unbelievable sacrifices on behalf of their nation and freedom and say to them, guys, now I'm calling it quits. We're going to have to give them Luhansk and give Putin an off-ramp. I don't think that's an acceptable answer to most Ukrainians at this point in time from the polling data and from the available data we have on the ground. It's going to actually take Biden fighting the bullet and being the bad guy and saying to Zelensky, listen, we've made a commitment of material aid. We're offering you all these things, including essentially a defense pact. We're offering you all this stuff, but if you don't come to the table, then we're going to have to start weaning you, like there will have to be a stick there, can't be a carrot. And so that will allow Zelensky, if Biden were to do that, it will allow Zelensky to blame Biden for the solution everybody knows has to happen. Zelensky will go back to his own people and he can say, listen, this is the way it has to go. Like, I don't want it to go this way, but it's not I'm signing up.
Fuck you.
Like, this is, it's not my money.
My
and
God.
Biden would take the hit because he wouldn't then be able to blame Ukraine for whatever happens next, which has been the easy road off, I think, for a lot of politicians in the West, is for them to just say, well, this is up to the Ukrainians to decide. It's up to the Ukrainians to decide. Well, is it totally up to the Ukrainians to decide? Because it seems like the West is signing an awful lot of checks, and all of Europe is going to freeze this winter. So,
this is the importance of great leadership, by the way. That's why the people we elect is very important. Do you think there's power to just one-on-one conversation where Biden sits down with Zelensky and Biden sits down with Putin, almost in person? Because or maybe I'm romanticizing the notion, but having done these podcasts in person, I think there's something fundamentally different than through a remote call, and also like a distant kind of recorded political type speak versus like man to man.
So I'm deeply afraid that Putin outplays people in the one-on-one scenarios because he's done it to multiple presidents already. He gets in one-on-one scenarios.
I actually hate this part too.
With Biden, and he seems to be a very canny operator and a very
Why do they have to put all the
hard
hard shit at the very beginning?
I think that if you were going to do something like that, like an actual political face-to-face summit, what you would need is for Biden to first have a conversation with Zelensky, where Zelensky knows what's going on, so he's aware. And then Biden walks in and he says to Putin on camera, here's the offer, let's get it together, let's make peace, you get to keep this stuff, and then let Putin respond how Putin is going to respond. But yeah, the big problem for Putin, I think, and probably public-facing fora, maybe it's a private meeting. If it's a private meeting, maybe that's the best thing. If it's a public-facing forum, I think it's a problem because Putin's afraid of being humiliated at this point. If it's a private meeting, then sure, except that, again, I wonder whether, when it comes to a person as canny as Putin and to a politician that I really don't think is a particularly sophisticated player in Joe Biden. And again, this is not unique to Biden. I think that most of our presidents for the last 30, 40 years have not been particularly sophisticated players. I think that's a risky scenario.
Yeah, I still believe in the power of that, because otherwise, I don't know. I don't think stuff on paper and political speak.
I don't know how you got me through the fucking wall.
Because from Zelensky's perspective, nothing but complete victory will do.
Right.
As a nation, his people sacrificed way too much, and they're all in. And if you look at it, because I traveled to Ukraine, I spent time there, I'll be going back there, hopefully also going back to Russia. Just speaking to Ukrainians, they're all in. They're all in.
Yeah.
Nothing but complete victory.
Yep, that's right.
And so, for that, the only way to achieve peace is through like honest human conversation, giving both people a way to off-ramp, to walk away victorious. And some of that requires speaking honestly as a human being, but also for America actually not even America, honestly, just the president be able to eat their own ego a bit and be the punching bag a little, just enough for both presidents to be able to walk away and say, listen, we got the American president to come to us, and I think that makes the president look strong, not weak.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it would also require some people on the right, people like me, if it's Joe Biden, to say, if Biden does that, I see what he's doing, it's the right move. And I think one of the things that he's afraid of, to steelman him, I think one of the things he's afraid of is he goes and he makes that sort of deal, and the right says, you just cowered in front of Russia, you just gave away Ukraine, whatever it is. But it's going to require some people on the right to say that move is the right move, and then he'll buy it if Biden actually performs that move.
You're exceptionally good at debate. You wrote How to Debate Leftists and Destroy Them. You're kind of known for this kind of stuff, just exceptionally skilled at conversation and debate, at getting to the facts of the matter and using logic to get to the conclusion in the debate. Do you ever worry that this power, talk about the ring, this power you were given has corrupted you and your ability to see what's like to pursue the truth versus just winning debates?
I hope not. I mean, so I think one of the things that's kind of funny about the branding versus the reality is that most of the things that get characterized as destroying in debates with facts and logic, most of those things are basically me having a conversation with somebody on a college campus. It actually isn't like a formal debate where we sit there and we critique each other's positions, or it's not me insulting anybody. A lot of the clips that have gone very viral is me making an argument and then there not being like an amazing counter-argument. Many of the debates that I've held have been extremely cordial. Let's take the latest example. About a year ago, I debated an unexamined from Young Turks. It was very cordial. It was very nice, right? That's sort of the way that I like to debate. My rule when it comes to debate and or discussion is that my opponent actually gets to pick the mode in which we work. So if it's going to be a debate of ideas and we're just going to discuss and critique and clarify, then we can do that. If somebody comes loaded for bear, then I will respond in kind. Because one of the big problems, I think, in sort of the debate/discussion sphere is very often misdiagnosis of what exactly is going on. People who think that a discussion is debate and vice versa. And that can be a real problem. And there are people who, treat what ought to be a discussion as, for example, an exercise in performance art. And so what that is mugging or trolling or saying trolly things in order to just get to the... that's something I actually don't do during debate. I mean, if you actually watch me talk to people, I don't actually do the trolling thing. The trolling thing is almost solely relegated to Twitter and me making jokes on my show. When it comes to actually debating people, that sounds actually a lot like what we're doing right now. It's just the person maybe taking just an obverse position to mine. And so that's fine. Usually half the debate or discussion is me just asking for clarification of terms. Like, well, what exactly do you mean by this? So I can drill down on where the actual disagreement may lie. Because some of the time people think they're disagreeing and they're actually not disagreeing. When I'm talking with Anna Kasparian and she's talking about how corporate and government have too much power together, I'm like, well, he's not the Tea Party. Like, you and I are on the same page about it. That sort of stuff does tend to happen a lot in discussion. I think that when discussion gets termed debate, it's a problem. When debate gets termed discussion, it's even more problematic because debate is a different thing.
And I find that your debate and your conversation is often in good faith. You're able to steel man the other side. You're actually listening. You're considering the other side. The times when I see that Ben Shapiro destroys leftists, it's usually just like you said. The other side is doing the trolling because they don't. I mean, the people that do criticize you for that interaction is the people that usually get destroyed are like 20 years old, and they're usually not sophisticated in any kind of degree in terms of being able to use logic and reason and facts and so on.
And that's totally fine, by the way. I mean, if people want to criticize me for speaking on college campuses where a lot of political conversation happens, both right and left, that's fine. I mean, I've had lots of conversations with people on the other side of the aisle, too. I mean, right, I've done podcasts with Sam Harris, and we've talked about atheism, or I've done debates with Anna Kasparian, or I've done a debate with Cenk Uygur, or I've had conversations with lots of people on the other side of the aisle. In fact, I believe I'm the only person on the right who recommends that people listen to shows on the other side of the aisle, right? I mean, I say on my show on a fairly regular basis that people should listen to Pod Save America. Now, no one on Pod Save America will ever say that somebody should listen to my show. That is verboten. That is not something that can be had. It's one of the strangenesses of our politics. It's what I've called the happy birthday problem. Which is I have a lot of friends who are of the left and are publicly of the left. And on my birthday, they'll send you a text message, happy birthday, but they will never tweet happy birthday unless they be acknowledging that you were born of woman, and that this can't be allowed. So on the Sunday special, I've had a bevy of people who are on the other side of the aisle, a lot of them, ranging from people in Hollywood like Jason Blum, to Larry Wilmore, to Sam, to just a lot of people on the left. I think we're in the near future probably going to do a Sunday special with Ro Khanna up in California, the California congressperson. Very nice guy, I had him on the show. Like that kind of stuff is fun and interesting. But I think that the easy way out for a clip that people don't like is to either immediately clip the clip. I'll take a 2-minute clip and clip it down to 15 seconds where somebody insults me and then that goes viral, which is, welcome to the internet. Or to say, well, you're only debating colleges. You're only talking to 20. I mean, I talk to a lot more people than that. That's just not the stuff you're watching.
You lost your cool in an interview with BBC's Andrew Neil, and you were really honest about it after, which was really kind of refreshing and enjoyable. As the internet said, they've never seen anyone lose an interview. So, to me, honestly, it was like seeing like Floyd Mayweather Jr. or somebody like knocked down. What was it? Can you take me through that experience?
Here's that day. That day is I have a book release. Didn't get a lot of sleep the night before. And this is the last interview of the day. And it's an interview with BBC. I don't know anything about BBC. I don't watch BBC. I don't know any of the hosts. So we get on the interview, and it's supposed to be about the book. And the host, Andrew Neil, doesn't ask virtually a single question about the book. He just starts reading me bad old tweets, which I hate. I mean, it's annoying and it's stupid and it's the worst form of interview.
Yeah.
When somebody just reads you bad old tweets, especially when I've acknowledged bad old tweets before. And so I'm going through the list with him, and this interview was solidly 20 minutes. I mean, it was a long interview. And we get to, and I make a couple of particularly annoyed mistakes in the interview. So annoyed mistake number one is the ego play, right? So there's a point in the middle of the interview where I say, like, I don't even know who you are, which was true. I didn't know who he was, but it turns out he's a very famous person in Britain. And so you can't make that ego play.
But even if he's not famous,
it doesn't, right? It's a dumb thing to do, and it's an ass thing to do. So so saying that was more just kind of peak and silliness. So that was a mistake.
I enjoyed watching it. It was like, oh, that's
glad somebody enjoyed it. So there's that, and then the other mistake was that I just don't watch British TV. So the way that interviews are done there are much more adversarial than American TV. In American TV, if somebody is adversarial with you, you assume that they're a member of the other side. That's typically how it is. And so I'm critiquing some of his questions at the beginning, and I thought that the critique of some of his questions was actually fair. He was asking me about abortion, and I thought he was asking it from a way of framing the question that wasn't accurate, and so I assumed that he was on the left, because again, I'd never heard of him. And so, I mischaracterized him, and I apologize later for mischaracterizing him. We finally go through the interview. It's 20 minutes. He just keeps going with the bad old tweets. And finally I got up and I took off the microphone and I walked out. And immediately I knew it was a mistake. Like within 30 seconds at the end of the interview, I knew it was a mistake. And that's why even before the interview came out, I believe I corrected the record that Andrew Neil is not on the left. That's a mistake by me. And then, took the hit for a bad interview. And so as far as what I wish I'd done differently, I wish I'd known who he was. I wish I'd done my research. I wish that I had treated it as though there was a possibility that it was going to be more adversarial than it was. I think I was incautious about the interview because it was pitched as it's just another book interview, and it wasn't just another book interview. It was treated much more adversarially than that. So I wish that's on me. I got to research the people who are talking to me and watch their shows and learn about them. And then obviously, the kind of gut level appeal to ego or arrogance like that's a bad look, and shouldn't have done that. And losing your cool is always a bad look.
So the fact that sort of became somewhat viral and stood out just shows that it happens so rarely to you. So just to look at like the day in the life of Ben Shapiro, you speak a lot, very eloquently about difficult topics. What goes into the research, the mental part, and you always look pretty like energetic and like you're not exhausted by the burden, the heaviness of the topics you're covering day after day after day after day. So what goes through the preparation, mentally, diet wise, anything like that? Like when do you wake up?
Okay, so I wake up when my kids wake me up. Usually that's my baby daughter who's 2.5. She usually we are on the monitor usually about 6:15, 6:20 a.m. So I get up, my wife sleeps in a little bit, I go get the baby, then my son gets up, and then my oldest daughter gets up. I have 8, 6, and 2. The boy's the middle child.
Is that both a source of stress and happiness?
Oh my God, it's the height of both, right? I mean, it's the source of the greatest happiness. So the way that I characterize it is this when it comes to sort of kids in life. So when you're single, your boundaries of happiness and unhappiness, you can be a 0 in terms of happiness, you can be like a 10 in terms of happiness. Then you get married, and it goes up to like a 20 and a negative 20, because your happiest stuff is with your wife, and then the most unhappy stuff is when something happens to your spouse. It's the worst thing in the entire world. Then you have kids and all limits are removed. So the best things that have ever happened to me are things where I'm watching my kids and they're playing together and they're being wonderful and sweet and cute and I love them so much. And the worst things are when my son is screaming at me for no reason because he's being insane. And I have to deal with that, right? I mean, like, or something bad happens to my daughter at school or something like that. That stuff's with it. So, yes, the source of my greatest happiness, the source of my greatest stress. So they get me up at about 6:15 in the morning. I feed them breakfast. I'm kind of scrolling the news while I'm making them eggs. And you know, just updating myself on anything that may have happened overnight. I go into the office, put on the makeup and the wardrobe or whatever, and then I sit down and do the show. A lot of the prep is actually done the night before because the news cycle doesn't change all that much between kind of late at night and in the morning, so I can supplement in the morning. So I do the show.
So a lot of the preparation, like thinking through what are the big issues in the world, is done the night before.
Yeah, I mean, and that's reading, you know, pretty much all the legacy media. So I rip on legacy media a lot, but that's because a lot of what they do is really good, and a lot of what they do is really bad. I cover a lot of legacy media. So that's probably covering, you know, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, Daily Mail. And then I'll look over at some of the alternative media. I'll look at my own website, Daily Wire. I'll look at Breitbart. I'll look at The Blaze. I'll look at maybe The Intercept. I'll look at, you know, a bunch of different sources, and then I will look at different clips online. So Media comes in handy here. Grabian comes in handy here. That sort of stuff, because my show relies very heavily on being able to play people so you can hear them in their own words. And so that's sort of the media diet. So I sit down, I do the show, and then once I'm done with the show, I usually have between, now it's like 11:15 in the morning maybe, because sometimes I'll pre-record the show. So it's 11:15 in the morning. I'll go home, and if my wife's available, I'll grab lunch with her. If not, then I will go and work out. I try to work out 5 times a week with a trainer, something like that. And then I will
regular gym stuff. Just start at the gym.
Yeah, weights and plyometrics and some CrossFit kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, beneath this mild exterior lies a hulking monster. And so I'll do that. Then I will do reading and writing. So I'm usually working on a book at any given time. Or
you shut off the rest of the world.
Yes. So I put some music in my ears. Usually Brahms or Bach. Sometimes Beethoven. Or Mozart. It's those four. Usually those are on rotation.
No rap.
No rap. No rap. Despite my extraordinary rendition of WAP, I am not in fact a rap.
Do you still hate WAP? The song?
It's. I will say I do not think that it is the peak of Western civilized art. I don't think that 100 years from now people will be gluing their faces to a WAP in protest of the empire.
But Brahms, the rest will be still around.
Yes, I would assume if people still have a functioning prefrontal cortex and any sort of
strong words from Ben Shapiro. Alright, so you got some classical music in your ears and you're focusing. Are you at the computer when you're writing?
Yeah, I'm at the computer. Usually we have a kind of a room that has some sun coming in, so it's nice in there, or I'll go up to a library that we just completed for me. So I'll go up there and I'll write and
like
read.
with physical books?
Yeah, I love physical books. And because I keep Sabbath, I don't use Kindle. Because when I'm reading a book and I hit Sabbath, I have to turn off the Kindle. So that means that I have tons and tons and tons of physical books. When we moved from Los Angeles to Florida, I had about 7,000 volumes. I had to discard probably 4,000 of them. And then I built that back up now, so I'm probably going to have to go through another round where I put them somewhere else. I tend to tab books rather than highlighting them because I can't highlight on Sabbath. So I have like the little stickers, and I put them in the book. So a typical book from me, you can see it on the book club, will be like filled with tabs on the side, things that I want to take. Now, actually, I got a person who I pay to go through and write down in files the quotes that I like from the book. So I have those handy. So, which is a good way for me to remember what it is that I've read, because I read probably somewhere between 3 and 5 books a week, and then in a good week 5, and then I write, I read,